The August 4th meeting of the Litchfield School Board. I'll call the meeting to order and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, great. So we have all members in attendance, but Heidi is remote. So we'll be doing votes by roll call tonight because we have someone attending remotely. Do we have any revisions or changes to the agenda?
I don't believe so. I think we're good.
Yeah. Okay. I have a summary of non-public actions from July 14th, which was our last regular board meeting. Mr. Bork made a motion to approve the non-public minutes of June 14th, 2021 and June 30th, 2021. Mrs. Harrison seconded. The motion carried 5-0. Mrs. Harrison made a motion to accept the nomination of Nicole St. John as English teacher at CHS at a salary of $59,723 for the 2021-22 school year. Mrs. Ames seconded. The motion carried 5-0. Mrs. Harrison made a motion to accept the resignation of Lisa Durant, LMS math teacher, subject to finding a suitable replacement. Mrs. McDonald seconded. The motion carried 5-0. I don't believe we have any presentations or recognitions tonight.
Other than the ones during the agenda, no,
Okay.
that is correct.
All right, and that brings us to community input. Would anybody in attendance like to speak for community input?
Just like you to acknowledge the fact that we sent you some correspondence
Okay.
for the board, and there's some itemized points to that as a follow-up to the community forum.
Okay. I don't know if we've received it yet. I think Brian just checked it wasn't in our email box, but I did get a copy from Representative McLean.
It should have been emailed.
I didn't get anything.
I sent it to school board.
Okay.
I have our copies if you got it.
Okay. I'm sure it'll.
I'm gonna get one.
We'll make sure, Rich. I have it.
Yeah.
I don't know why it didn't go, but we'll forward it from our account so everybody has it.
Yeah, I didn't send it to each person. I sent it just to school board.
Yeah, we each should have gotten it. That's how that email works. But thank you.
I sent it about 8 o'clock this morning.
But you have received a copy of it?
I have it, and Mary and I were copied on it,
Okay.
so we've received that, I believe. But I'll make sure that you get it.
Okay. Thank you.
We've been in a retreat all day, so that's why
Oh,
Mary's.
okay.
I've been running between Learn to
Cross-eyed.
Learn and the retreat, so if
Okay.
I got it, I have not yet had a chance to catch up on my email from today.
Okay, it's a busy time of year. Okay. We do have a Google Meet link up for community input as well.
There is nobody else there. I'm going to
Okay.
actually let me hit the join now just to make sure that, yeah, there's nobody else in the link.
Okay. Any other community input? Okay. We'll move right along to correspondence.
We had 9 correspondence over the last 2 weeks. First which was on 7/19 from Rachel Salas, inquiring what the ground rules would be for the forum, which we already had. The school board answered questions, and also the school board responded to the right to know. Next correspondent was 7/21 from Mary Woodman. There was a copy that was sent to Laura Gandy in response to her 91A, requested on 7/14. And on 7/26, we received correspondence from Brian Dodge, who again is asking to reallocate funds from the fundraiser his sons were involved with on Washington DC trip. He wants to know if the funds can be utilized for materials for building for their sophomore project, and how he goes about getting that approval through whoever oversees that project. The next one, 7/27 from Todd Beauregard. Not able to, he just says he wasn't able to attend the meeting. He has 3 kids and saw critical thinking, never anything objectable. He looked through the curriculum and found nothing biased or divisive, sorry. And he states the town folks are artificially causing or making a cause to attack our teachers. The next was from John Crows on 7/27. Concerned with how HB2 would prevent open, honest consideration of controversial divisive matters. Example, he said 1969, the brown blue theory or experience. Hold teachers to curriculum, let them foster critical thinking, let the students dig into topics and search for perspective and truth. Next on 7/28 from Kathleen Grandine, support of teachers, admin, and school board. The decisions made around curriculum. Appreciates classes that taught critical thinking. And she talks about her sons having different views than she does, which is healthy and a good thing. She doesn't want to see barriers put up to keep teachers who are invested in challenging the minds of our children. And I want to be pressured from the community and keep the decisions with the school board. On 7/28 from Patricia Owens, she says that CRT is not being taught. There's opportunity to engage in political battle. It's the responsibility of our elected school board to determine curriculum. Expect the school board teachers to make decisions that will promote excellent education. 7/29, Mike Brenton states that his son never had issues with his social studies teacher. His daughter, on the other hand, had a problem with the teacher who preached their beliefs and told them who to vote for even in the last election. His intention at the meeting was to get ahead of critical CRT agenda in the schools. The reason school board should denounce CRT is because it does not speak of unity. It focuses on everything of race. And he talks about mask and specifies that his son will not wear a mask because there's no scientific proof that masks work. And the last was on 7/29 from Kate Stevens, thanking the school board teachers and admin for a special meeting. And she appreciates the message of unity and it should continue. That was all.
Brian? That will bring us to superintendent comments.
Thank you. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was the message of unity. So as you know, we have taken the message of unity down. It is not on the website currently. During the community forum, we asked people to weigh in with their thoughts on what to do with the message of unity and sort of structured around three concepts. One, just leave it down completely. Two, put the message back minus the resources. And then three, put the resources back minus the one that was causing the most controversy. And if you look at the minutes of that, it seems to be about 21 people when they came up to speak weighed in on those questions. And 2/3 of them were recommending that we keep the message of unity minus the resources. So it did seem, again, that's 21 people out of a town of 8,000, but those in attendance were speaking to the feeling that the message of unity itself was helpful, and that the resources were not needed to speak to that. So I have been working on the message of unity also to clean the language up on that, to make sure that we're being really clear about what we're saying. And I've struggled with it, to be quite honest. In the message of unity, there are 2 bullet points that seem to be causing most concern. The first is relative to the curriculum work on social studies. And I'm struggling with getting what it is that we really want to say there and to be clear about that for people, because the message was intended to be a forward-looking thing. And every time I try to do it, I'm responding. I'm not projecting, if that makes any sense. And so it's put me in a position where I'm not sure how to word that in a way going forward. Mm-hmm. The other one that we heard from people on was about our hiring practices. And I'm pretty comfortable with the way that's worded, because all that is a commitment to the federal law on equal opportunity employment. So I'm not sure that that is a controversial subject in the way that the first bullet point was. So those are the only 2 bullet points that I've received feedback on, I'm pretty sure. And again, I'm struggling with how to proceed on that first one. So I'm looking for direction from the board.
Can we take take a similar tact with the curriculum in that, just reiterate that we'll be following the law and,
Yeah. Do you want? I mean, we could take a look at if you've made changes. We could take a look at the language, like the draft you've come up with at the next meeting, and we can, take a vote. We never really did because we had consensus among the board and the other district leadership. So I think what I heard was people want us to approve if we do put something out that it's approved by the school board.
I don't want George Floyd's name in it at all.
Well, that would be. Oh, I see.
I don't think he needs to be mentioned at all.
Well, and that's a good
it
point
is going to be a
because-
new message of unity anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we're not going to predate it back to that
Right,
time.
yeah.
So the letter does need to be updated if
Yeah.
we put it out there
Yeah,
again.
I agree.
And I'm supportive of putting it out there without the links.
I guess that's the question I was going to ask is, as the board,
Mhm.
do we want a message of unity?
I
I mean, I don't know if you want to vote to proceed with one. I mean, there's no sense in proceeding if the board doesn't want a message of unity.
I think it's important given everything that's happened. I just,
I agree, but
recently.
I'm just
so,
saying, do we know that
Yeah,
the whole
sure.
board is in
Sure.
that feeling?
right.
yeah.
There's no sense in sitting down writing it if there's 3 members of the board who don't want a message.
Well,
of
and I
unity.
think the best way to acknowledge, what the community has told us and what we've heard is to reissue it, under from now on.
Today's
And under today's what we've learned and what we pledge to continue to do. What do you think, Liz?
I just don't want George Floyd's name in it, and I want it to be right up the middle, unbiased in either way, either side.
And no attachments.
No attachments.
You can do your own research. There's plenty of it out there.
Heidi, do you have any thoughts?
I'm supportive of the message going back up, but I would like to see the language of the revision first. But as a concept, yes, agree with the message itself, but leave off the attachments.
I don't think it has to be, what did I say? We don't discriminate, we don't do this. It doesn't have to be long, flowery language.
No.
Fair hiring practices.
Mhm.
Not that I'm saying you have long, flowery language.
Okay, so does that
So-
make sense then? As if we
So the marching orders I'm hearing is you do want our team to try to develop something minus, putting it more contemporary. So it's not a year ago in response to an incident. It's more
No incidents.
forward looking based on who we are and how we want to proceed.
Yes.
And leave the resources off and adjust the language. You're looking for us to adjust the language to be, in Liz's words, more down the center of the road. So if I captured that right. So let me take it to our team and take a stab at it.
Okay.
By the time we left the forum late Wednesday, it was sort of pulling it up on Friday to start to, can we do something with this?
Yeah.
And that's where I got myself bogged down and
Yeah.
I held off until this. So that's why there's not a link with it, but I definitely wanted to
You need
address
to
it.
walk away for a few days and
Yeah.
come back.
Well, and I wanted to hear the board
Mhm.
weigh in, right? So there's not a lot of sense in spending energy on developing something that we aren't clear on what we're developing. But that gives me greater clarity. And I think the other commitment is that what we bring forward is then editable and owned and voted on so that we know where we stand on that. And we'll go forward. All right.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. The second thing, I just want to give an update on the LMS project. So Corey has greater detail in his report when you look at the VA's report, but the portables are gone. And if you pull into LMS into the property, it's like night and day to just get a sense of what it looks like without the portables in the front yard.
Are there parking spots under where they
There
were?
are 15 parking spots that have been removed.
Wow.
And believe it or not, the portables did a beautiful job of protecting the pavement.
So they're the best
That's like
spots
the
in the whole.
couch and the rug.
Once you
Yeah.
swept it, the sun hasn't touched it in 20 years. So it's really prime, really some prime parking out there. And so it's nice. A couple things I want you to know is that in our contract with Schiavi, there was a clause about us paying, I think it was $7,800 for the removal of the portables. So that bill has been received. And then after the portables arrived in their next destination, so Cumberland, Maine, you're very welcome.
Cumberland, Maine.
Cumberland, Maine, they found damage to it, and they've sent us a bill for $1,500 because they're claiming that there was graffiti painted on the side of it, which nobody can recall the time that there was graffiti painted on the side of the portable.
It was Tom.
And they're also saying somebody got up on the roof with an ice pick and punched holes in the metal roof. And Dave Ross is like, absolutely not. Nobody did that. So we're now in a
That's
in a
insulting.
discussion with the company about the further bill. So I just want the board to be aware that the portables are gone, but they're not over. So we're
Right.
still
It's not resolved yet.
discussing our
You
way
just
through
never
those.
go
I think they
away.
get more than enough money from us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
for
This
what
is-
we got.
Yeah.
Brian, this is the point. Corey added up the cost that we paid for the rental of those and said, are you kidding me? After
Yeah.
all our time. And on top of that, you have to remember, we spent a significant sum purchasing the portables at Griffin
Right.
from the same company. And we're like,
And
They
one
can't
thing
wait
is, those things were
$1,500.
deplorable, and they should have pulled them out for new ones
$1,500.
several years ago.
Yep.
and we feel that there should have been an on-site inspection. You don't haul them away
No.
and then say, this is what we
Mhm.
found later. So we're in ongoing, and I just want to be clear that we're working on that. With the rest of the project, so pleasantly surprised, the windows arrived a week early. So the windows were on site. North Branch has done a phenomenal job of going through and removing the windows, getting them all loosened up so that they were ready to come out quickly. And now they're putting the windows in. That project is proceeding very rapidly. So we're in a really good position relative to the windows installation. What we have found is that the insulation around the windows was not too good. And so this has given us a great opportunity to fix that and to really make sure that we're well insulated. We also have done 2 trial classrooms. So if you look, there's one classroom that sort of faces as the parent drop-off road. I think that's the north side of the building. I'm not sure. But anyway, when you pull in, you'll see that the exterior of one classroom has had insulation put along the slab at the bottom and secured up. So that is a way to make sure that the room is not bleeding heat out through the slab. And we've also done one on the opposite side of the building. So we're going to monitor those this winter and try to figure out what the energy savings are from that versus the cost of doing it so that we can, determine whether that's something that we want to do with the rest of the building. And it may even be something that we want to do further at Campbell, because that's one of the concerns at Campbell is the heat bleed through the slab. The floor slab ends up being, think of it like a wick. The heat goes into it and then it just touches the outside air. And so it's just wicking heat away from the building. And if you can insulate that, it will save the taxpayers a significant amount of money down the road, we believe, but we're going to test it out to make sure. And the other thing we found when we removed is that the wall goes up to the ceiling, but it doesn't completely seal. So it was never insulated up at the roof wall juncture. So we're providing the insulation there to make sure that, again, it will have expense in phase 2 of the project, but if it's done correctly, it should pay for itself in terms of what is done with the insulation. So both things are progressing very nicely. And the main office conference room is framed out. That's going to be, there's now the hole in the wall where the door will be, or maybe there's a door in it at this point. There wasn't last week, but everything is progressing really well on that. And HVAC unit 1 is also on track. The Ventacity unit that was spec'd, if you remember, they found one down in New Jersey, drove down and got it because these materials are really hard to get. They brought it up to us, and we made a decision that it's going to be placed on the rooftop. And so that is in the process of being finalized. So really in a good spot, but let me pause and see if there are questions about the project that you want to ask.
Well, that's the same question I've asked several times. The marquee. Sign.
The sign. The sign is covered under the canopy project, and I don't honestly know the answer. Let me find that out because Jeff Kelly what's the email? There's one last thing that they're finishing up on that. Oh, I know. It's the, so the flagpole is in the center. They're putting the light. The light finally came in. So they're going to install the light and they're going to do the concrete work for that. And then I think the sign is the last part, Brian. So let me check on that and get back to you. Anything else on that project? If I can just jump quickly in my report to impact fees. So the town is holding impact fees. We have consulted, or the town has consulted with their planner relative to those fees and the way they can be utilized, and has determined that those fees can be used for the HVAC work that we're doing at both LMS and CHS. So Monday, I think it was last Monday night, the Board of Selectmen released those funds and made them available as long as we submit receipts and so forth detailing how we utilized it. So,
How much money was that
so
approximately?
it's in the agenda. So let me just click the
100,000
link.
Rounding up, I think.
It's $188,000 at the middle school and $279,800 at the high school. So it's a significant sum of funds that will go a long way when you couple it up with ESSER funds and other resources. It really will allow us to get everything buttoned up without asking the taxpayers for that amount of money. So, so it's good news that we have received permission and the release of those funds from the select
Did
board.
we talk about, I know that there's basically right now, there's 3 different buckets, one for each school with the impact fees. Have the selectmen discussed at all combining them into one bucket for the school district? My only concern is that the LMS impact fees, you know, we're doing a lot more work at LMS than we are at CHS. And so how does that work out?
So in communicating with the town administrator, Troy Brown, this is a bigger question that we need to go back to,
Okay.
because the way the fees were designed, what we learned is that the school fees are what are called the recoupment fees. So you can recoup costs that you've had, and they are set up differently than other impact fees that the town has collected. So the library fees are not recoupment fees. They were future growth fees, and that limits the way they can be
Okay.
used. So I don't know that I fully understand it, but we want to, we need to, now that we have this question answered
Right.
and we can utilize the funds for the work that we're doing, we need to go back to the town and sit down and sort of figure out how do we proceed
Yeah.
on it,
Yeah.
because there are still other questions about the way they've been
Yeah.
earmarked.
Do we know what the total is available? Do we have those totals? I
The,
mean, because I looked at the, you know, the 2 totals that were approved, and I'm like, okay, well, what's in there?
What's left?
that's the total.
Yeah, that's all.
That is the
That
total.
is the total.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the amount
Got
that
it.
has been collected and the
For
amount that
those
is
2
available.
schools, then does that mean there's more for Campbell?
GMS?
No, that's what's in there now. I get the accounting update every month
Yeah.
from the town. And there's a little bit in there for GMS, and it earns interest
Okay, yeah,
every
see.
month. That's why GMS isn't listed. But I believe that's, if Rich can certainly correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's a planning board discussion, correct? The impact fees.
Yes, and what I come away with on the impact fees is there's, anytime you think they're logical, you need to rethink it, because they aren't logical.
It's true.
And, you know, you think of impact, you know, because of an increase in population, you have an impact. Well, that means that for one thing, but another, it doesn't mean that.
Mhm.
So it's best that you consult somebody to get it right. And it isn't logical.
So there should be some left for GMS. We're just not sure how
So
much that is.
there is about 15,000 in the fund for GMS.
Oh, okay.
There's the amounts that I just read at LMS and CHS. However, there's question about the GMS one. So that's why we
Oh,
really need
okay. All right.
to meet with the
Yeah.
town. I think Corey and Troy need to work this out, because there's some confusion about what is where and why.
I believe they're not collecting elementary fees at this time.
Oh, I see.
They stopped collecting them a while ago because there wasn't a capital plan for
Sure,
GMS.
sure.
So, but now that we have one,
Right.
yeah. All right. Well, thank you for that.
But the good news is that's really helpful toward the projects that we're engaged in. So the fact that we're able to tap into those is helpful to all of us.
Thank you.
And then the last thing I want to just talk about GMS enrollment, and Principal Mitchell is here. And Dan, I went in.
Yeah.
You updated this 3 hours ago.
Yeah.
I updated it more frequently because I changed it to August 4th. So
Okay.
I wanted to make sure that everybody knew these were today numbers, hot off the press. So Dan, walk us across what you have for enrollment so we can hear it.
All right, so to get you to where we are today, I can tell you that on Monday, I was coming in and telling you that we're going to need an additional first grade teacher, and everything else was okay. Yesterday, I was coming in and saying, we're under, barely, but we're under. That was until noon today, when between noon and 12:05, we went down 2 in first and went up 2 in fourth. And so where we currently sit with our numbers is 83 in kindergarten. That's good for 5, which has already been allocated. 82 for first, which is good for 4 at fourth. 4 at first, which is where we have 80 at second, which is good for 4, which is what we have assigned at second. 88 at third, which is good enough for 5, which is what we have assigned. And 98 at fourth, which is good for 5, but we only have 4 assigned. So currently right now, if you look at class size averages, that's going to give you 16.4 at kindergarten, 20 3/4 of a child at first grade, 19 3/4 of a child at second grade, 21.5 at third. I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong line. 20 at second, 17.6 at third grade, and 24.5 at fourth grade. So in reality, that means you have 2 classes of 24 and 2 classes of 25 students with those numbers
In fourth grade.
in
But
fourth
if we
grade.
add a fifth, it will go down to 18 and 19.
It will go down to 18.8. Yep.
So if you remember, the additional one in kindergarten was a transfer. That was an internal move that we had made. And we're bellied up to the number in many of the grades, as you can see, but we are now over by 1 in fourth grade. And reminder that we have the class size reduction fund that we have set up. We haven't touched it for 2 years, but there is in that trust fund, there is the money for 1 additional staff member.
I also just want to point out, because questions had come up even earlier on in the process with, what's the summer really like? How many do you really get? How many do you really lose? Now, we recognize that this year could be an anomaly. We had a lot of families who kind of, I'll say, went into the wind because of last year's uncertainty, and they've kind of come back to us, which is nice. But just to show you, just focusing on that last column, 421 at one point on May 18th, I presented to you with 416. We're now up to 433.
Wow.
So you can just see that total number roller coaster that's there. But as of May 18th, that's when everyone started realizing, I got to get them registered for school. Because then it went to 424, 427, 430, and then you're just seeing that slow uptick. And that's accounting for families who have, even these numbers reflect even kind of unofficial withdrawal. So we don't even wait for the records requests. If a parent comes and says, we're moving to X, we take them out of the numbers.
Oh, that's good.
And to get into the numbers, it's actually more official than to get out of the numbers, because we put them in the numbers, not just by rumor or hearsay. It's when they fill out the registration in the Power School app, then they get added into the numbers.
Dan, how are you on equipment for a 4th grade classroom?
We could make it work. We received that generous donation from BAE, if you remember, back in April. So that takes care of a lot of the ancillary stuff, the teacher desks, the bookshelves, things like that. And I believe we'd have enough student desks, because over the last year and a half, we have been purchasing new student desks without automatically discarding just the old ones. So we could speak it
I
together.
would also think that Tom probably has some extra desks for you.
Yeah.
Your smaller classes have gone up.
It's true.
And we're hoping to eat lunch in the downtown.
Is that where all the desks are now?
Right.
All right.
Just so the board understands, because I've been asked this by some members. So, Dan, am I on your case about, are you taking them out as much as you're putting them in?
Absolutely.
So I'm on top of that. Like, we're not just adding and, if we know they're gone, and as he said, it's even
Yeah.
more rapid that they get removed than the add-in. So we are monitoring these daily.
It adds to our credibility, especially with the budget committee. I want to be as transparent as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So just this week, first grade went up from a few enrollments, but we actually saw we saw 5 students unenroll. One was official, they're going to St. Francis. One was reduced from the numbers because the mom came to the window and said, "Here, we found this stuff while we're backing up. This is like a Chromebook, and we're moving to Merrimack." Take them out of the list. Another one is there's been some email exchange, but we found out that 2 are going to Londonderry. Nothing official, nothing more formal than the email saying that, but they're out of the numbers too.
All right.
So a question I have, we're 4 weeks from the start of school. I know we're over on the numbers and we're over what the trigger says, but 4 weeks from school, it concerns me the kind of teacher we're going to get that's available now 4 weeks before school. Is it really better at this late date to potentially have slightly larger classes versus a
Full-time sub,
yes?
that's what I
Oh
don't
my
want.
God, I was an August hire. I am offended.
Not in this district.
I don't know.
What do you think? Dan?
That's my concern, is because I know that happened just a year or two ago, that we had to get
Right.
a full-time for, I don't know if it was
Part of
first
my-
grade or what it was. It was like, but it's not.
Part of my concern or question, and I know Heidi, you're not up there anymore, but I know
I'll put her up there.
like part of our discussion this fall, we had a discussion about the average, the trigger number, right? That it only triggers, they rounded down on that trigger number. But we decided to stick with that trigger number for this year until we have a discussion after we've gone through this year. And I feel like we have to do the same thing for when are we going to make these final decisions? I feel like August is too late. I know the numbers are shifting, but I feel like it doesn't do our district any justice, honestly, to hire somebody this late in the game. And seems like every year we have to scramble. I feel like as a board, we should make it, after this whole thing passes, we have a discussion along with the trigger number, like when are we going to make a decision on this?
Well, a few years ago, we added a first grade classroom the day before school started.
I remember.
And that worked out great. That person is still on the
Yes.
staff. That person ended up being, a green teacher, but very good for the district.
And at that point in
So-
time, it was hard because of just kindergarten being added, and those were more variable numbers, and I understand that.
But
this
I think if we made a decision early in the summer, Dan came to us and asked if we could have another teacher for 4th grade. And we decided as a board to stick to the trigger number. And I think if we say now, well, it's too late, I'm sorry.
I'm not saying
Oh,
for
okay.
this. I'm not saying for this year. I'm saying the
I think we
discussion
definitely
should
need to have a
happen in the fall
discussion.
after we're out of this.
Yep.
Again, similar to the trigger number discussion.
But to your
In
point, we were saying,
context
like,
with
what are
what
we going to
we're-
get for a teacher?
Right.
I think if we can find a certified teacher that we're comfortable with, then I think we should hire the person. If it's just going to be like a full-time sub, someone who's not certified to teach, but can teach, I don't think that's the rule.
Full-time sub is certified, right?
Yeah,
In order to be a long-term sub.
Yeah.
they have to be.
I'm on a whole different
Once you
page
exceed
here.
20 days of subbing, you have to be certified.
Right.
I'm on a completely different page. We want to build a new school. We have to tighten our belts. Things are going to have to be tight to show taxpayers who don't want their taxes to be raised that we're not hiring an extra teacher to make 15 kids in first grade. We have to be really careful because people are watching every move.
I understand.
Yeah, but to that point, we are at the trigger number.
Oh, absolutely. I 100%.
That's we discussed a month or so ago,
Can I-
and we wanted to add a teacher because we were close, but that wasn't the trigger number.
Yeah. This
Right.
isn't a luxury ask.
This
This
is-
Oh, exactly.
Oh,
But if
Heidi
we
has-
did this months ago, it would have, we would have added a first grade teacher too, and it doesn't look like we need one. at this point.
No, you weren't asking for a first grade at that point, were you?
Yes, it was.
I was asking for a first grade and I was going to swap third and fourth grade.
Heidi wanted to say something too.
Yeah, can I just jump in to say that I understand where everybody's coming from, but particularly with our higher trigger number being for fourth grade, and we've exceeded that class size, there will be classes with 25 students, and that is far above what I would ever want for my child in a fourth grade class. That is too much for the teacher. There's not enough space, especially in a COVID year. I agree we need to tighten our belt, but what is the point of having trigger numbers if we're not going to
Oh,
abide
I'm
by them?
100%. I think 24 is by far a max. My son had 24 in fourth grade, and they were big bodies.
The other thing, Liz, too, is we're not looking for more money from the taxpayers.
No.
We have the money already
Right.
set aside for that reason.
That's
This is
fine.
that-
I'm
yeah.
I'm for a fourth grade teacher.
Okay,
I'm just saying we need to be careful.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Also, what happens if we say, okay, go ahead and hire a fourth grade teacher, and then tomorrow your number goes down?
I will answer that.
What's that?
I'll answer that.
They'll
We
teach
won't be-
physics
We
at the
won't
high
be
school.
hiring a fourth grade teacher. So I
Really?
think we have to recognize that there's a turnaround time here. Dan
I need
is-
to initiate the hiring process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think if you authorize him to initiate it, but we're not going to actually complete the hiring until we are more confident. If that means that we come back on August 18th with, here's where the numbers are, because you know what, it might not be you got to hire with some flexibility, because if fourth grade drops by 2 and first grade goes up by 3, it's going to be, so, but I think permission to proceed with initiating is something that we need at this point, and then we'll finalize the actual numbers. But if you give us permission to proceed on August 18th, we're now hiring somebody the morning school
Right.
opens, and that's not the way to do it either. So
I'll make a motion to proceed with adding an additional, at this
I'll
time,
second.
fourth grade teacher.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Any
Jumping
further-
right in there. Sorry, guys.
I wanted a second. No, I'm just kidding. Any other further discussion? Okay, all in favor? We'll do a roll call. Actually, we'll do a roll call vote. Tara,
Aye.
Brian,
Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
Heidi,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. So 500.
Thank you.
excellent, thank you. That was the end of my report, unless you have more for me.
I do not. Anyone else? Okay, we're on to school board comments. Anyone have any comments?
I have one that I'll just go out there publicly. It was brought up by a couple individuals, I believe, at our last meeting at the auditorium for the school board to denounce CRT. I, for one, will not do it. I'm not going to denounce anything. So I'll just be public about that.
All right, any other comments? Heidi, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I was just going to say I wanted to thank everyone who came out for the CRT evening last week. It was informative for me as a board member to hear what our town thinks, and I think it's very important to have those discussions, as uncomfortable as they sometimes can be. And so I appreciate everyone who came out, everyone who spoke, everyone who wrote in, and keep the dialogue going. I hope we can continue to have civil discourse. A lot of good conversation can come from this topic. So again, I just wanted to say thank you.
If I can just expound on what I said as far as not denouncing it, because I don't think anyone can give us a clear definition of what CRT is. It's from one end to another. Everyone's interpretation seems to be a little bit different, a little bit more of a twist to it. And I can't put my hands on what it is, so I'm not going to denounce it. It's no different. I'm not going to denounce, an object or a black cat. I'm just not going to. Not this time.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, public minutes, July 14th, 2021. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from our July 14th, 2021 meeting.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor, roll call vote, Brian,
Yes.
Tara,
Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
and Heidi.
Yes.
And I'm a yes, so that passes 500. Have you guys had a chance to go through the community forum minutes from July 28th?
Well, those, I'd just like to clarify, those are not really minutes.
Oh, okay.
It is just a
Those are notes.
verbatim discussion
Okay,
of the community input so that people can see what was said, and it could be factual.
Okay.
The minutes, I apologize, minutes are not ready. It was a little quick. But they will be up probably and posted tomorrow for people to see them. So
Okay.
if you could table that until the next meeting.
Can do
And I
that.
think that's great that you did that, Michelle, because
Yeah.
there were several speakers that you caught most of what they were saying, but I still like there were bits and pieces that
Well, a lot of it was I kept out the I mean and
Yeah.
because and a lot of people kind of started to say something and then, not that they corrected themselves or anything, but it was kind of like they started a thought and then reworded it. So
Mhm.
when you're doing verbatim description and you want you want to catch people at what they say, it has to be a complete sentence or you just lose the thought.
Yeah.
So I did as best as I could. There were some inaudible areas. Sometimes something from the audience wouldn't get caught on the speaker, and sometimes something from the board table wouldn't get caught from
Yeah.
from
No,
it
I
either.
appreciate having that record of what was said.
And I could always go
that we
back
can go
and
back
and see if there was anything I really could hear better. I just had to step away from it after that.
10 hours,
Yeah.
right?
All right, Mary, that brings us to the assessment overview.
Okay.
I think we'll do one principle at a time, just
Okay.
so that we keep our 3-foot
Mhm.
piece. But Mary, I've got behind you, you can't see it, but I have your presentation to lead, and then I'll switch over to
Very
Dan.
good.
So
Very good. Okay, so we are here tonight presenting our spring 2021 testing information, our testing data. I'm here just to give a little introduction and walk us through sort of how to read the reports and a little bit of the background. So 2021, we actually had 2 rounds of state testing. If you remember correctly, I was back here in February reporting on the fall testing. So students in grades 4 through 8 and our students in grade 12 actually made up their spring 2020 testing in October of 2020. So typically, because of the pandemic, because schools were shut down, the state canceled the testing and moved it till the fall. So it was slightly different in that it was done through taking the SAS interim tests for the grade that they were in the spring of 2020. And the seniors took the fall version of the SAT. The one thing that we did not do, the state dropped the requirement for the spring 2020 science SAS. So we did not test science for that group. So now fast forward to this past spring, students in grade 3 through 8 and in grade 11 went back to our regular spring state testing schedule where we tested both the SAT and the SAS summative tests. I wanted to point that out because as we look at the data, we do not have data to compare from last spring's testing to this spring's testing.
But we can still compare to state, right? State averages for that time
For
the SAS testing, right?
so what we are looking at right now is our current this past spring's testing.
Yeah.
We have the state averages for that.
Okay.
But what we can't look at is comparing
Last year's to
the spring 2021 testing to the spring 2020 testing, which actually took place in the fall. They were not the same tests and with the
Time frames. Yeah.
correct.
Yep.
So you will see some gaps in the data, and that is the reason why. So why are we looking at this data? I just want to highlight some of the things that have come out of our admin team retreat and the discussions that we've had around it. We look at this data to help us eliminate general gaps that were caused by the inconsistent 2021 school year. I mean, I think that's a big thing that we have to address. One of the other things that this helps us to do is to identify that group of students that are on the bubble, specifically that bubble between like approaching proficient and proficient. Those are kind of the kids that are in the middle that don't get the extra support because they're testing on the low end, or get the extra enrichment because they're testing on the high end. So this really helps us to identify ways to help move that group of kids. Again, it continues to give us insight into our curriculum progressions and allows us to make modifications as appropriate. And it also helps us to ensure that our current classroom assessment models include similar language and similar levels of rigor to what the kids see on the state assessment programs. We had a lot of conversation over the last couple of days about this, in terms of, we're not teaching to the test, but our kids should be familiar with the language and the style of questions that they are going to see. One of a couple of the comments that we talked about was that we tend to do single step questions, but when they're taking the SAS, it's multi-step. And so we need to really get our kids comfortable with that kind of an advanced question. So the more we are able to look at the data across the board and the questions across the board, that's going to help us to be able to inform the way we get our kids prepared for all of this deeper, more rigorous assessment. Okay. So you'll see tonight in the various, I highlighted SAS specifically, but you'll see in the various reports a couple different graphs, and I just wanted to kind of explain how to read them. So if you look at the overall test performance graphs, this is actually our summative ELA scores for all students that took the spring SAS ELA. I'm not digging into these numbers because the principals are gonna share that with you, but I wanted everybody to see the different levels. So there are 4 levels on the overall test performance. A level 1 is in red, and that's when a student is below proficient. In the yellow, that's level 2, and that's the language there says a student is approaching proficient. The green being level 3, that is a student who is proficient, and the blue being level 4, and that is a student that is highly proficient. So ultimately, our goal is to get our kids in the green and blue.
Are those true numbers?
Yes.
Wow.
Those are true numbers of all
the grades.
all the grades
Okay.
combined.
As of last spring.
Yes.
Still a bit concerning to me.
45%
Yeah.
not proficient.
Right.
Well, we also have a high special ed count, but this test accounts for that. They have accommodations on the test. Are they read to and all that other?
If it's
Mhm.
Yeah.
if it's needed.
Yeah, so their
yes.
accommodations make.
Yeah, that's concerning to me. That's not a high performing district, in my opinion.
One thing to point out though, if you read the description for yellow, approaching proficient, and then it says generally performs slightly below. So look at the qualifiers that are in there. So yellow is not necessarily awful. It's, that they're on the cusp. And you're going to hear tonight, Mary talked a little bit about the bubble. We're looking at that yellow-green bubble. So, that range, that yellow range is not, if you read the descriptors for red, we definitely don't want students in the red zone, right? But the yellow does talk about, they're likely able to access grade level content, and they engage in higher order thinking with some independence and support. So it's the qualifiers in there really aren't as bad when you read it out. But I'm in agreement with you. We still want to nudge people into proficient, right? But we're talking about slightly below, generally able, likely able. It's not the sky is falling.
So
Right.
those kids get tier 2 intervention?
That would be the point that these.
That's what I do. I do yellow. That's my job, is yellow.
Yeah, and supporting kids and nudging kids from yellow toward green is what we're all trying to do.
Yeah.
But it's not
No,
total doom.
no, right.
So I'm sure the principals will be sharing their numbers. I'm just curious if there's like certain classes or, grades that really affected the yellow and the red.
Again, this is just, I've not done
Yeah.
No.
that.
This is an overview.
The principals will dig into that so that you can see the more individualized data. This is just the general data, and really for the purpose of being able to read, to go over how to read the testing
It'd
piece.
be interesting to see it next year.
So the last slide, one of the other pieces, once you dig into that overall test data, is you will see some subsection performance. Those actually are reported out in 3 as opposed to 4. So you will see red, again, just like on the 4-point, is considered low, student having difficulty with that particular subsection. The yellow is at or approaching. So as we were just discussing, yellow being not so good, in this sense, it's kids that are actually at the proficient benchmark who are considered in the yellow, and green being on or above. And typically this will have to do with multiple questions. That's how they can address whether a student would fall into the at or approaching or the at or above. So those are the types of graphs that you will see tonight. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of an introduction to how to look at them. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Mitchell.
All right.
Thank you. I know, I'm trying to read. Make it bigger.
So some of this will be repetitive because Mary did a great job of presenting it. So I'll just give you a little bit of background information. Again, it's the same thing that she said. So our 4th graders took part in the 3rd grade interim assessment in the fall. So in reality, basically what we got this year was a double baseline. So we didn't get a progression report in our 4th grade. We basically got a baseline in our 3rd graders and a baseline in our 4th graders that will then progress from here. So, however, in May, they did participate in the summative assessment. And even with the remote, initially, when the test came out, the state said there is no remote option. So the kids have to come in. So I put that out. And so our opt-out numbers were a bit higher than normal. We had 6 parents opt out. In fact, actually we had, I believe it was either 3 or 4 that said, you know what, they can go in and take the test. So we actually had some of our remote students come in and take. It turns out later on in the process, kind of flow under the radar, kind of in the darkness of night, the state said, no, we can have a remote option. But at that point, we were too deep in it that we just said, we're going to stick with what we had. So unfortunately, we had more than normal of those opt-outs. Normally, you're at 0 or 1 or 2, you know, so 6 was higher than we normally had. So Mike, can you go to the next slide? So again, as Mary was saying, so now what will we do with this kind of double baseline data? Well, first off, one of those classes that we got a baseline is now going into the middle school. So we'll share that. However, even at elementary, when we're dealing with 2 grades that take it, we don't have a lot of time to actually do specific student type interventions. Really, we can use this information to look more systematically about what we're doing. Is our curriculum and our approaches hitting the things it needs to hit? Is it not hitting the things that it, you know? And so are we focused enough with our time and our approach to kind of get our students where they need to go? And you'll see in a little bit, not so much in the overall scores, but when you get to relative strengths and relative weaknesses, we can really focus in on what is it that this test is telling us that we're missing, and what is it that it's telling us that we're doing well.
And who's getting reading intervention?
So reading intervention,
We have like 4 teachers at the elementary school, don't we?
we do, but remember the SAS, we get data on 3rd and 4th grade. Reading intervention happens a whole lot before that.
So you don't do it in the 3rd and 4th grade reading intervention?
We do offer some reading intervention. However, we don't get these SAS results until May, June of 3rd grade, May, June of 4th grade. So we're making those decisions based on previously the Ames Web, soon to be the iReady, as well as in-class assessments and a variety. So we look at the
Okay,
totality of the student progress, especially informally and then through the CAP processes. That's how we make those decisions, but not just on that SAS assessment. Mike, next slide. Yep. So we'll start with math. That's kind of where we are with the breakdown for the whole school. You can go to the next slide so you can see the same information. And that's how it breaks down per grade. So I'll give you a second to digest that before I point something out. Now, you mentioned the whole focusing on those bubble kiddos. So in fourth grade, consider the lower bubble. So the ones that missed the proficient cutoff score by 5 or less points, there were 9 students. If we get them over that line, all of a sudden that 48 becomes 32 and that 28 becomes 40. So that's what we're talking about, that kind of low-hanging fruit and those little things that we can do that make a big impact. And so that's why you have to dig in a little deeper. And that's not to say we abandon the kids at the red, but if you want kind of high impact, not low effort, but small investment, high impact, that's where you get those. However, on the same side, there's just as many kids who just made proficient by 5 points. So I look at that 5 point over the proficient line and 5 point under. You end up with a group of 16 to 18 kids. You need to make sure those kids that were just barely there stay there. And those who just missed it, give them that little boost of whatever area it was that it shows it as a relative weakness. And you can make a whole world of difference in terms of the general overall proficiency of the school or of the grade level. Next slide, Mike. So now if we look at both third and fourth grade in math, what does it tell us? Our relative strengths, and this year, actually, the program changed a little bit. So you can actually scroll across, and the state in their results actually assigns it. They give you a plus mark, a little circle, or a minus, and it says, this is a strength, no change, or this is a weakness. So you didn't have to really necessarily data dive. I will obviously data dive to figure out who are the kids, what are the are there grades? Is this the whole grade is missing that? Are there certain classes that are mixing that? Because that's where, and I'll skip a little ahead, that's where the PLC, a really good formal PLC format can come in, because to get teachers to a place of comfort and security where they can say, my class missed it. What did you guys do differently? And have those conversations. That's where we're going to really start getting a real big bang for our buck to increase our weaknesses to our strengths. So relative strengths, numbers and operations, multiplication and division, mathematical reasoning, algebraic thinking in grade 4, relative weakness, algebraic thinking in grade 3. So next slide, Mike. So next steps, the first thing that always pops out to me are those discrepant results. So this one makes a little bit more sense, and we'll get to a little bit later in ELA, but algebraic thinking is weak in third, but strong in fourth. So in some sense, that's supposed to make sense. And it points you to the fact that, oh, we must just not get to algebraic thinking. But I don't want to just assume that. I want to look at that and make sure that if we have a weakness in one grade and a strength in the other, what's happening? And it could be our curriculum overall. It could be our programming. It could be our approach. So these are the questions that we're going to ask. The best way to look at the SAS results is really to look at them and have it generate the questions that you want answers to, as opposed to drawing conclusions just from the data. So these are the questions that would be going in the next steps. And again, much like just Mary said, systematically, we want to make sure that our scope and sequence is hitting what it's supposed to hit, as well as looking at those bubble kids and reviewing. This is where you can kind of get into a little bit. Reviewing the assessments to make sure that we're not only hitting the topics that the assessments are going to hit, but also even approaching them and asking them the way that they want to. The biggest difference that we've seen in the last 4 or 5 years that we've had SAS, well, before we had SAS, we had Smarter Balance, and they kind of approach it different. In these summative assessments, math questions were usually asked very straightforward, and they had to perform. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, we had these assessments, and now the math assessments are 3 paragraphs long with graphs and 8 questions, with 8 questions having 2 approach. And so now all of a sudden, even our programs, our curriculum have had to catch up to just the approach of how these students are being asked to perform. Not necessarily can they perform, literally, how are we asking them in a way that they can prove to us that they can perform in that way? And so some of that means adjusting our common formative assessments, our approaches, our assessments. Not that we're teaching to the test, but we're saying, this is a way that you're going to be asked to prove you've learned what you've learned. Can you do it? And so those are the little tweaks that we need to make at grade level meetings, and not just in third and fourth for SAS, but it really starts in K first and second, because as you may have just deduced too, this is a math test, but what I just threw at you is a question that is drowning in literacy skills. And you need to have those paired together in order to actually be able to perform the way that you are.
They're taking them all on Chromebooks now?
They are
as
taking them all on
So that's
Chromebooks.
a whole other skill that these kids need to have. in
Yep.
order
There's
to
also
do
the
all
tech
of
skills
this.
that go along with it. Yeah. There's literally, even though we are one-to-one with Chromebooks now, often there are simple things that we take for granted, which is that we need to make sure that we are hitting things like the ability to click and drag.
Mhm.
If it's not explicitly stated in any of our work to teach them how to click and drag, they're going to go to that test and say click and drag, and they're not going to know what to
I
do.
think they don't want to use pen and paper. They just click and answer. But seriously, that's too much work for a lot of the kids that they're not used to going from here to here and
Yeah.
back and forth.
Yep.
I just went back a slide because notice the relative weakness is word
Word
problems,
problems,
right?
yeah.
So
It's going to be
You
everywhere.
take
But
that
Tom has it too.
and what Dan said about literacy.
Right.
So,
Yep.
it's all interpreting and understanding what's being asked of you. So
Well,
it's
it's
all so
And
intertwined.
I'll
It's
tell
not
you, on these
just
assessments,
math.
the word problems that they're being asked
They're
are
horrific.
not
They're horrible.
figure out the numbers that you need, figure out the operation that you need to use, and solve it. It is, there's one that the word it's basically designing a supermarket, and all of a sudden you're bringing in algebraic concepts and you're pulling everything, and that's the word problem. So it's been a paradigm shift,
Yeah.
certainly in the way of assessments go. So ELA, you'll see that it's actually fairly in line with our math scores. I know most people don't like to see this, but it is a perfect bell curve. It is literally a perfect bell
I was
curve.
going to ask that question. What's the goal? I mean, is our goal to be, minimal red, minimal yellow, mostly green and blue?
The goal is to have a positive bell curve. So
Yeah.
the bell should be somewhere. We'd want the bell to be over the mid range of the green,
Mhm.
whereas right now it's literally the range over the 1 to 4.
I think that's ultimately you want to reduce that red,
Yeah.
ideally to zero.
Right.
And
We want
and-
everybody
and
on grade level.
Mhm.
the yellows, right? So I think that's what you keep pulling in. And, here's the independent external test that tells you where you are.
Yeah.
But you have to make sure that that's not including things like Dan's mentioning. Am I comfortable with the testing environment?
Right.
It's really, what do I know about math? What do I
Mm-hmm.
know about ELA?
And if you go to the next slide, you'll notice, again, very consistent performance.
I feel like
Perfect
another
bell curve.
goal besides the bell curve that you just discussed was, I as a parent have an expectation that our students will on average perform better than the state. And do you feel like that's another, I want to know, are these where do we stand in terms of the state average? Because I do, as a parent, have that expectation.
I always check too.
Same.
The state average is fine, but I'd rather look at our cohort group and how do we compare to them? Because that's how we selected them, school
Right.
size,
Right.
location. State, it's all over
Can we
the place.
get that? I don't think I've seen
Cohort
that.
group,
We
Care
we
cohort.
you can dig it out. It's not the state one's easy because it shows
Right.
Right.
the cohort group. You have to
Select which towns.
Once they're published on the,
So
Yeah.
who would you consider a cohort? Pelham?
Well,
Well,
we have the
we have
list
a
of
cohort
12.
list.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like to say both.
Bows on
Both-
it.
Bows on
Yeah,
it.
because they're the same size, small community. No,
Hollis is
well,
on
they
it.
do have a
Yeah.
Chinese food restaurant. We don't. But other than that, they don't have a church.
again break. You can go back.
Sorry.
Third and fourth grade. Just again to point it out. Your bubble is 12 to 14 kids split down the middle. You move 6 or 7, and all of a sudden you've influenced that. You've gone from 27 to 34 and 12. So that's where again you can make a big impact by focusing in on those students, just figuring out what is it, that minor thing. So going into next slide, Mike.
Comparing and contrasting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, this is ELA. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I gotta
but
shift
it's the
my brain.
opposite.
But you
result.
should you should see it. So that was one of my discrepancies. And I went, I really want to know what's going on here, because why are we strong in third grade,
Yeah.
but something happens in fourth grade?
We'll see if Tom has it.
We'll see. You're gonna see the same stuff.
Yeah.
Similar.
Yeah.
Interesting. Oh, those are straights.
I'm
So
not surprised by these numbers, and I hate to say it, but COVID, mass fatigue, kids were tired, it was hot, uncertainty. I did not want to use COVID as an excuse, but I really think this is a off year.
and again, I've had to change my thinking to keep reminding myself that this is a double baseline. So this is where we are, and this is our chance to actually look at what it is that we're doing to influence that. And if we can make those changes, then we should see growth and increases.
We should have SAS scores for third and fourth grade for 2019, 2018, don't we?
Yes,
Okay.
but it's not the same cohort of kids.
Right,
clearly.
right. But we have that
Yes,
data.
but I
so we
can be
track.
able to look back and say,
Yeah.
do we always do strong and compare and
Right.
contrast in third grade and
Right.
go down in
Is
fourth
it
grade?
really a glitch
Yeah.
year?
That's information.
Those percentages.
I would actually have to make sure I can actually access it. Yeah, because
Yeah.
my personal
interested in
profile
that
versus
too.
what they give me permission to.
Right.
That being like a fifth grade class.
Okay.
And so again, much like in the math, we're going to focus on those bubble kids, especially those discrepant results, because that was the first thing that kind of jumped out at me. I was like, wait a second. Reviewing our program materials, as well as reviewing writing prompts, checks for understanding, and literature passages, to make sure that we actually have a good blend of both literary and nonfiction text. And this is actually where you can get in and not just thinking about what you do in ELA class influences your ELA assessment, but really how are we introducing and utilizing nonfiction writing and reading for understanding in social studies and science. Because when they take this, they're being asked to, write a response about an essay about, the northeastern beaver, and the habitat of that. And so they need to understand how to be able to read and respond through a scientific lens, as opposed to just what it is that we do in our writing curriculum. So making sure that we're cross-cutting and hitting it at every point that we can. And then I mentioned, because I have found, and this is not necessarily true, but effectively utilizing and integrating the SAS modules. SAS modules, for those who don't know, for those at home, are mini assessments that target in these sub areas. So instead of taking the whole math assessment, you could take a module on algebraic thinking, or you could take one on reading and responding to literary text. And so if we have this weakness, it kills a lot of birds with one stone, because one, it's going to target performance. Two, it's going to introduce to those writing prompts and questions the way they're being asked. And three, it can actually act as a formative assessment in preparation for these tests. Again, not replacing and not teach the test, but really giving you some real solid information about a preview of how they're doing along the way and progressing on there.
Do you have the teachers do that? Do they choose to do it, some of them?
They had in the year prior to me starting, but they didn't necessarily. They would admit that it wasn't necessarily used this
Yeah,
year.
just like the test. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And they're usually short. Either I think some are as small as 6 questions, and they get up to like 15. But I believe they're meant to take a half hour. I think they're targeted to be a half hour session of assessment, but you get really good data and information. So that's it for me.
They're modulars, so the intro covers everything.
Like
So
practice
it's just
tests.
like a practice.
Oh, okay.
The modulars really look at like the different subsections, the different topics. So prior to this last year, we were using modulars in the elementary and in the middle school to support our instruction as well. The teachers might give the modular on fractions when they were doing a unit on fractions, and so.
Hello, good evening. So I'll jump right in here. You're going to hear a lot of repetition on this report. So being that we are grades 5 through 8, all of our students take ELA and math. Additionally, in grades 5 and 8, they take science. So like was mentioned, October 2020, the SAS interim, and then in the spring was the summative. Just a couple of sort of editorials and factors in play this past year. You know, you mentioned COVID, but we had a really solid foundation for a process through our PLCs the year prior, integrating the modulars, integrating just conversations around not only the general data for a grade level, but really the individual student data. Because it's not just, I mean, we can look at grade levels, we can look at trends, and we can look at cohorts, but then the next conversation that's really important is digging into individual students and looking, are there inconsistencies? Is it, is it something that we need to look at more closely through our RTI model? So that's one thing that Dan mentioned, the modulars. We will be getting back to that, and I'll get to that in a little bit. The other thing this year that we did not do that we've done in the past, as you may or may not know, middle school kids are not always motivated to take a state test. So we've done some fun things over the year with goal setting with our students as individuals and had motivators for them. And then as a whole school and grade levels, so that we can really sort of rally around growth. And that really is what we're looking for, is the individual student growth, the cohort growth, taking them from where they started beginning of year to growth over the course of the year. So that's something we'd like to bring back this year, and our PTO supported that. We've had a lot of fun things over the years with the goal setting. Similarly, what is the data? What does it tell us, and how will we respond? So that's the sequence of what I will present. And there is our 5 through 8 SAS data. Given the fact that we have 4 grades, and over the course of those 4 grades, quite a few kids, quite a bit of data, it really is important that we're looking at each grade individually, that we're looking at trends over the 4 years. And since I've been doing this, I see a lot of fluctuations. So there are trends that we sort of like dig in on and really want to look at closer. But then there's also some fluctuation. So we want to look at, why and maybe what happened that year, and maybe what's going on within that group of kids or that grade level. ELA grades 5 through 8.
Well, they're all at least 50% in green and blue.
Yeah. Okay, so what does the data tell us? So relative strength in writing overall, literature, and reading informational text. And I was happy to see that in general, the informational text piece was a relative strength. That's an area that we've put a lot of focus in over the last several years. And when you think about it, I mean, all areas of literacy are important, but as students go up in through the grades, as we prepare them for that next level in high school, secondary, informational text, both reading and writing, becomes incredibly important and relevant. So it was nice to see that as a relative strength. Relative weakness was reading literary text and speaking and listening. I thought the speak and listen is kind of interesting given COVID, and it makes me wonder. Like Dan said, you sort of look at this data and then you ask questions and you try to, sort of resolve maybe where are some of these. But I'll tell you, if there was any impact on the COVID environment, I think that speaking listening piece was an impact. So
does the
maybe,
testing have an audio component to it then?
Well,
How are they testing the speaking and listening? If it's
they can listen. Some of it is auditory,
Okay.
but quite honestly, I mean, it's not going to simulate like a classroom presentation or something. And if anything, I would say, of the areas, given the format of the state test, it probably is the area that's the hardest to like really say, all right, is this really accurate to where we, to what we see in a classroom? So it's something we need to look at more closely.
what's the difference between reading standards for literature and reading literary text?
Yeah, so literary text is more like fictional type stuff. Literature is not only fictional stuff. Excuse me. Literary text is more content based, and there's a fine line between the two. Literature is more common stuff that's published that they may have seen before. Literary text may be something that's
Is that like the life cycle of a butterfly is literary text?
well,
and
the
science
reason I'm
fiction?
hesitating is there is sort of a crossover between literary text and informational text.
Yeah.
And I don't have any samples to show you. I could bring that in another presentation, but there's a very fine line between those two, the literary and the informational.
Right.
Literature is more, I guess, recognizable type text that they've maybe seen before at that grade level.
Yeah, I'm wondering what this like reading standards. I don't know. It's just odd that they'd have literature and literary text in the same place.
You
It's
also,
the distinction is very fine
Okay.
on those.
you also
But I
lose a
can,
lot of kids that way too.
What's that?
Literacy. If it's low interest, they'll read the first paragraph. And
Yeah. That's okay. We'll move on.
okay, so how will we respond to the data? So one of the relative strength within writing was conventions. And while evidence and elaboration is part of those stronger writing scores, it was of the areas they break down for writing, it was not as strong as the mechanics. So we're doing a good job with convention and mechanics, but I think a focus on evidence and elaboration across our content areas is going to be an area that we talk about at our grade level team PLCs. Focus on one specific area within literary text was the identification of theme and providing textual evidence. Emphasize a variety of informational text as the basis of evidence as supporting ideas. Develop rubrics to assess student language, calibrate our expectations for student writing amongst teaching staff. You're going to see some of this in our school goals, that in our PLCs, calibration really important, not just writing in ELA classes, language arts classes, but across content areas. And provide ongoing opportunities for students to present their learning in a variety of settings with a variety of media. Math whole school, grades 5 through 8. And the question was asked earlier, are there specific grades that sort of like move that needle one way or the other? I think you'll see that when you see the breakdown by grade here, the next slide. So you can see we have a big area of yellow in grades 5 and 6, big area of red, but yellow. And by 8th grade, the trend really is moving. And we've seen that trend for quite a while, that over the course of the 4 years, we are moving students from the red, yellow to the green, blue. But we're absolutely going to be looking at what are some specific areas in grades 5 and 6, or even 7 with 31. I'll talk about that in a minute.
That's interesting because the double block of math is in 7th grade.
We see a big jump in 7th grade. That's definitely been somewhat of a factor in that. Okay, what does the data tell us? So relative strength, modeling and problem solving, operations and algebraic thinking in grade 5, ratio and proportional relationships and number system in grade 6, and expressions and equations in grade 7. And then you see a trend on the relative weakness. And I've talked about this before. Geometry, measurement, geometry, statistics, and measurement, those are all sort of interrelated. And I think and I'll get into this in our next slide, but as we look at scope and sequence, geometry is an area that typically is a later in the year in the scope and sequence. And so and that's just in math. It's an area that we need to put a focus on, not only in math, but I mean, measurement is across. So there's a lot of ways that we can do that.
And the same in dance.
address it.
It's consistent with GMS too.
Yes, stuff at
Geometry
the end
measurement.
of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny because, Eric Momney teaches tech ed, and, he's made comments about, geez, I'm seeing
Yep.
some inconsistencies in measurement skills. So it's an area we can address across content
Yeah.
areas.
We've talked just about how the science department can support this. If you're talking
Oh,
data
absolutely.
analysis, measurement, et cetera.
Statistics,
So, this can't be seen as the math test that
Right.
the math teacher is responsible for. The team will
And Eric
take
too,
ownership.
hands-on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Measuring stuff there.
Okay, so how will we respond? So one of the things that that's been mentioned is this is a spring test, and it was given back in fall 2020, but it is a one-shot deal, and that makes it somewhat of a challenge. I mean, we look at it with that global look, and we do dig in on individual students, but because it's only one data point for the year, that can be a challenge. And ideally, what we want to see is an assessment, and then we address it with interventions, and then we assess again, and then we see how we're doing, and then keep that cycle. So with iReady coming in, we'll be assessing all students over the course of the year 3 times. And we're going to get that feedback. Not only will we get that feedback, embedded in iReady are the interventions. So it's going to give us a natural cycle to that assessment and then intervention, and then is it working? And if it's not, we need to relook at how we're addressing it. The other thing, and I'll talk about this in our goals, but best block this year will be an instructional block, and it will also be intentional time for interventions. And so between our math specialists, our math tutors, teachers, we will be able to provide support, targeted support to math concepts.
Sorry.
That's all right. We will use modular assessment tools. I already mentioned that. When we look at our RTI model, our math specialist works with mainly tier 2 students, some tier 3, but mainly tier 2. And that will continue. This year, but capitalizing on that best time. And as we develop rubrics to assess students, we will calibrate our expectations for student problem solving amongst teaching staff. So again, it's that collaborative approach amongst the instructional team members at the grade level. Dan mentioned the language of the test, and I absolutely think the academic vocabulary, what the question is looking for, and the way the questions are worded really have an impact. If we have students with weaker language skills and literacy skills, we will typically see some connection there in the math test. They may be able to compute very well, but these multi-tiered questions can become a challenge. Okay, we move on to science. So again, science is grades 5 and grades 8. This is the combined. And then these are the breakdowns between grades 5 and 8.
This is concerning.
It's very concerning.
Well, I guess we found the class that brings the numbers down.
Well, this is science. This is a different test.
I will jump in and say
Yeah,
that
it was
across the board,
In the state, yeah.
across the state, across the grade levels, the science scores are significantly lower than the
Did the assessment change?
that's historically been
Yeah.
since they went to the SAS science, the scores have been.
Although, how many times did we give SAS science summative? I think it was once after we adjusted the grade level, then the COVID piece. So I think this was only the second administration of science.
It might be the third.
Might be
but
the
it's either
third.
the second or third.
It's still a relatively new test,
Yeah.
and the revamping of it is so unlike the last test was more science facts. This is way more application.
Just like math. When I tell you, it's not like what is 3 plus 3 plus X. It'll have a big grid, and the kids have to go between like your eyes cross.
Yeah.
I mean, this is another, and I'll talk about this in terms of, what do we do with the data, but it's another one that using the modulars for science as well is going to be very helpful because the questions are very complex. The way our science scope and sequence at the middle school is set up is, and you'll see when we talk about some of the targeted areas that we want to address, but for example, grade 8 is physical science, grade 7 is life science, some earth science, grade 6 is space, astronomy, meteorology. And so they may get some focused instruction in that in grade 6, be tested on it in grade 8, and there's some gaps there. So that's something we want to look at across the board, grades 5 through 8. How can we be addressing some of these concepts over the course of the 4 years? So it's not a gap between 5th and 8th.
Right. Right. Do you do a quarter of life, a quarter of
I
physics?
think that there's a lot of different thought processes to how to integrate the science. And are you doing a like cyclical type setup when you are working through K to 8
Right.
before you get into the high school when it is very course specific? But we haven't looked at science yet. I mean, in all honesty,
Right.
we've been focused on math, social studies, and ELA right now. Science is next on the docket, but that is going to need some significant time and significant discussion around how do we want to approach it to be able to close some of those
Is the
gaps.
SAS mandated by the state,
Yes.
Yeah.
including the science? I mean, I was shocked as a parent to get my students' results in science. I was shocked because it does not represent who they are, I don't think. And I think other board members were probably the same way. We've talked about this. And
The question is it valid?
yeah, that's
So
the
if we
thing.
continue
If
to
the
see
numbers
these
are
things
so
around-
low at the state level, are we
Right.
pushing back on the state to improve this testing?
Haven't done this in a long time, depending on what the state test is. And right now with SAS, I can tell you that, and I can't, every kid in the state is every student 5 through 8 is being tested on it. So I can't say, our middle school kids in Litchfield, they're adolescent students and, the same likewise in Bedford and Londonderry. And I mean, so like some of these challenges, but I can tell you that given the COVID year, we had 10% of our students opt out. I should have said that at the beginning. We've never seen numbers like that. Middle school numbers, they tend to be a little higher on the opt out, but this year that was
That
an
was about our
anomaly year
online
for us.
population, right?
We saw a lot of remote opt outs. We saw a lot of students, quite honestly, were just completely burnt out, a lot of anxiety and things like that. And they were just, I think the families just made the decision that this was the year we're going to opt out. So it was an anomaly year. I'm confident that that's an anomaly year, but our sample size then becomes smaller. And I also heard from the teachers that the students were some of them just quite honestly just not invested. They were rushing through it. They were, things just to be done.
Too.
So I think we saw that more this year. I will say the fact that we didn't go through that goal setting and the motivational piece of it, because I do think like any test, if the student is not giving it their best effort, it's going to be inconsistent data. And I think the data was more inconsistent this year as a result of that, for sure. I can tell you, my own daughter in Londonderry or in Nashua, the number of kids that opted out, and this is high school, but the number of kids that opted out, they just decided, I'm not taking it, was, I don't know what their numbers ended up being in her school, but it was an exceptionally high year.
So this isn't, those factors aren't unique to Litchfield. Like you were saying,
Oh,
the
right.
science
No.
scores across
No.
the state saw this.
They are not.
Okay.
And the other piece is we've talked a lot about the modulars and the interims for ELA and math. There are years where we don't have access to those for science until right before the testing has taken place. It's not, they're not as, right. So it's not the same level of like, I can jump in right now and jump into some ELA and math practice. Science isn't with the same frequency. So that over the years since they've switched to this test has also been an issue. And I can't speak for the principals, but I do know that, I know because we dealt with it at the high school, that, in practicing, trying to practice it, we couldn't do it. We couldn't access it. Our proctors couldn't access it. I don't know if that has been the same situation at the middle school. Our focus has been more ELA and math.
One of the things, it's not just a science thing, but, and I know Dan put an emphasis on that modular piece, and we are too. It's as simple as making it sort of like a bell ringer in your class and using it. And it doesn't have to be, okay, kids, go do this. It can be, let's walk through this as a class. Let's talk about the academic vocabulary. Let's talk about the intent of the question. And a lot of times it's not about the answer, it's about the process. So that's a great conversation to have as a whole class.
In the vocabulary.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, think of it like the SAT, the amount of prep that goes into SAT and tutoring and practice tests and learning the intent of the question. And likewise, there is an aspect of that to this test. Okay, so within science, you can see there are general areas of subcategory, and then there's really more specific. I really wanted to give you a look at how that, if you just look at it globally, there's relative strength and weakness in the same area. But then when you dig in a little deeper, which is what I wanted to do with grade 5, you can see real specific subcategories. So for example, grade 5, Earth and Space Sciences, Earth's place in the universe is a relative strength. Earth and human activity is a relative weakness. Life science, kind of like in the middle, but there's specific areas that are relative strengths and weaknesses. So as we look through this and as we really get more specific in how to address some of these things, I think it's important that we get to a more granular level to really look at, our units of study and the assessments we're using and using the modulars as a way to dig in on some of that.
Okay.
How do we respond? Best block again. Science teachers will be able to provide that specific support in science as they can in the other content areas. I've talked about the modulars. During PLC time, teachers will examine the trends. We've talked about that. And some of the, if it's a lower depth of knowledge question, there's really no need for a rubric. But when we're talking about multi-tiered questions with answers that require more depth, having rubrics in math talk about problem solving and those type of answers they're giving, and likewise in science, lab reports and things like that, rubrics really become very helpful and allow teams to calibrate what their expectations are. And that's another piece that actually, as we're going down the curriculum process now, that's like sort of the next step is developing common rubrics for our content areas.
Not mentioned on here is that we've gained about 90 instructional hours at the middle school with the new schedule. So it's how do we properly utilize that additional time? And even the PLC model for teachers has gone from 20 minutes to 50, I think. So, the teams will have more time dedicated toward working together. So, there are things teed up, but the old saying is twice the time to waste away, or twice the time to make the hay. And I'm hoping in this case that we can actually.
I've never heard
Is that a New
before.
York thing?
Have you heard that before? It's a wicked old saying, apparently. But the point is, how are you going to utilize that? Use that time? And my hope is that we can use it to really impact what it is that we're talking about tonight.
We're going to make hay. That's what we're planning.
So when does the math department meet? I understand the meeting is teams, like the 6th grade team. That's great. But how does a 6th grade teacher meet with
Vertical.
the 7th grade? What do they meet that way too?
So some of this year, the schedule allows for multiple grade levels content teachers to have the same PLC time
That's so
during the day.
important.
So we'll be able to do some of it that way. And then
Even
quite
8th
honestly,
and 9th
some of
grade?
our staff meeting focus this year is going to be more in that content specific vertical.
Yeah.
Well, and the other piece is that has been our district's focus
Yeah.
for the last, since I came on board, is to really be, anytime we do have those district meetings, is to do that K-12 alignment.
So important.
And we've started seeing it bubble up a little bit more naturally. And I know science and social studies, they've done their after school meetings. They've done them as joint middle school, high school, so that they can start doing a little bit more of that vertical planning as well.
Like that would be awesome. Like Mary, the 6th grade's having a problem with graphing. How's the 7th grade? That's so important.
Yep.
That's awesome. I'd like to hear Mary and Tom.
All set?
Any other questions? Good. Thank you.
It might be harvesting hay and not making hay, just
It
saying.
doesn't matter. I've never heard it before in my life.
At least you don't make hay.
I have, but
Have you?
yeah.
Yes.
From the 1800s.
But my family uses a lot of really old terms. So.
Those upstate New York
I
colloquialisms.
don't know what you're talking about.
Right?
Hey, everyone.
Hi.
I have a bit of a cold, so I've been wearing the mask just to be sensitive, but I'm far enough away from everyone. I think we'll be okay. So the high school is a little different from the two other schools because we have 3 sets of assessments. We do the SAS science, the SATs, and then the AP testing. So we'll jump right into the SAS, the science, since Tom ended it on just the right note. If you could jump forward. Awesome. So this past year, as Mary had referenced, our seniors did not take the SAS science in their junior year. It was postponed and then the state canceled it, so they did not take that. So we don't have any comparative data to look at across the past couple of school years. Our juniors did take it in the spring, and we had 89 students out of 103. Technically, there were 2 other students who are outplaced students, but who are Litchfield residents, whose scores were included in that as well. So if we go in and actually start looking at the data. So here's where I look at this and I go, oh, this is grating on me. So we had one student who on overall scored above proficient, which makes 1.1% of our students.
Those numbers, Tara.
Statewide, however, you're looking at 5.5% of the students achieve level 4. Okay, so certainly that speaks. And if you look down to the next level, we had 27 students. Great, 30% of them were proficient. 37.4 is the state average. So our top 2 tiers there, proficient students, at 31%. That's not encouraging. Not encouraging. And when we look at the level 2 and level 1 is the most disconcerting to me. But look at level 2. That's essentially in line with the state average there of the number of students who are approaching proficiency. But level 1 is the one that stood out. 41 students, 46% versus 37.2% for the state.
But Bill, how do you get buy-in from high school students? Click, 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 click.
Well, and that's a great question. And it also connects back to students being able to understand the type of tests that they're taking. And what Mary just said a few minutes ago about not having the modulars available for students.
I don't think they buy into it. No offense, and the kids don't buy into it. It's not graded, doesn't count, not going to colleges. And I'm not making an excuse.
No, but that speaks to what Tom referenced in terms of trying to motivate the students and get them. We need to
I don't
think
think
a
this
little
is a
bit.
true picture.
No, I would agree with you on that. I think if we look at the next slide, the test is broken down into 3 sections. So it's life sciences, physical science, and earth space sciences. So that yellow group in the middle, this is the one that we're talking about. That's the group of kids that we want to push up to above the standards, and those below the standards push up above there as well. So if you look at that sort of above the standards, CHS students for life science, 19.8, same as the state, 19.8% of, okay, that's in line. You look at the next one, we have 45% of our students that are near 54 at the state average. We're below that. We look at that below the standard, there's your concern, is those students in that bottom tier that are struggling to do well in these assessments.
Do you
So-
think they're trying to do well? That's what I'm saying. And I'm not bashing anybody because
Yeah,
I've
no,
watched kids. I've been at the high school. I've been at my school. They're not as invested as, they don't want to please anybody.
But Liz, my pushback on that is, are
Yeah.
Campbell kids less invested than kids across the state?
Right.
I don't know.
So what you're saying
It's a
may have
second
some
line.
validity, but when we're comparing to the state, you're telling me that, I think we're a far better school than what this tells. And so
Oh, I
what-
do too. That's why.
I agree. And I think there's some reasons for that. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. But certainly the physical sciences, I looked at this a couple of different ways. I looked at above the standard or at an above the standard 20%, say, on life sciences. If you clump them together, we had, 80% of our students at, near, or below the standard. That's kind of frightening to me. Okay, so there's room for growth for those students in the yellow and the red there. If you look at physical sciences, 88% of our students, okay, at or near or below the standard. That's cause for us to be really concerned. Now, they're not that different, however, if you look at the state numbers for life sciences, 80%. If you look at physical sciences, it's 84%, 85%. So certainly while they scare me a little bit, they're not out of line with what's happening in the rest of the state in terms of those struggling students, those students who aren't above the standards yet. Yep. And this speaks a little bit to the type of test it is. Actually, we'll talk here. When we looked at that number of one student who performed above proficient, okay, when you look down at the subtest, you actually see, for example, in the biological sciences, life sciences, we had significant numbers of students who scored up in that top above proficient group of students. That speaks to Kate Devine. The kids just had her sophomore year. Going into junior year, the life sciences stuff is still with those students. It's still in them. Our earth space science, what had been happening for those students in their freshman year, a couple of years ago, there are certain areas of that, earth space in the universe and earth systems, they did really well. Physical science, I was kind of surprised by the physical science because our teacher last year was first year teaching physics, and yet matter and its interactions, our kids did well on that. You look at the challenges, and here's where the specific challenges are. And this is going to be useful information for the teachers when we come back in a couple of weeks. Okay, here are the areas where we need to look at curriculum-wise, instructional-wise, what's happening in our classrooms. Earth and space sciences across all three of those subsets there, where our kids do not do well. Life sciences, the one area where we struggle, ecosystems, interactions, energy, and dynamics, and then physical sciences, energy, motion, and stability forces and interactions. So there's some things to work on here. If we go to the next slide, though, the bottom one right there, begin programmatic use of modular interim assessments. There's no question that our kids need to have experiences doing that. And going back to last year, we couldn't access the modulars. Okay, we left school in March. And so we didn't take assessments, they didn't get them. Our current students, last year we couldn't access them. Our current students didn't quite do so well as they should have done. My hope is, part of that challenge last year was our curriculum facilitator was not in the high school teaching last year, she was teaching remotely. Okay, so that opportunity to provide guidance and support and kind of dig and scratch away at those things, we were missing some of that. We have a new CF this year. I think Joanne's going to do a terrific job. And I think she's really going to get the teachers together in terms of looking at these assessments, looking at the breakdowns in the various areas. And then the other piece is looking at the individual students. Because I know some of our students, I've looked at the actual data on them, and some of those students, they shouldn't be scoring as poorly as they're scoring. That just doesn't make sense. So targeting students, then targeting areas of the test certainly is something that the Science PLC will be invested in doing.
It's too bad some of these scores can't be imported somehow into PowerSchool for each of the individual kids to kind of track their own progress. Then they might feel some ownership over them.
It's a great point. I know there are some SIS systems that do actually import your test scores for kids to see. I'm not sure that Power School has that ability.
We can check that. I believe they can. I think it's something that can be just a custom data field and brought in there.
And I think that would be great for kids to see that.
Yeah.
And there's another strategy you can take too, which is to sort of have the counselors bring kids in and talk about their assessments and looking at them through those lenses as well.
And I agree with that. I mean, even just having the conversations with the kids about the assessments, you know, it has an impact, especially at the high school level, where it's sometimes it does become that one more thing. But if they realize the impact of it and the big picture part of it, I do think it does have an impact.
Do they get mailed home? I can't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, I go over them. I hang them on the fridge.
And Mike Perez at the start of school meetings talks to the junior class specifically and talks to them about state assessments coming up, and they're important for you both in terms of sort of the SATs, essentially, okay, college and career readiness and those types of things, but in terms of you know, that's a part of a larger picture for yourself.
I just went back a slide because I look at Earth and human activity, and you saw that as a weakness, I believe, at the middle school. Here it is again. And I'm not exactly sure as a science teacher exactly what that means, but I do think it's more than just science. I think it's a more encompassing concept that, you know, our social sciences also need to be engaging with. And so, you know, as we dig deeper into this, I think it really gives us the opportunity to engage more teachers across the school and the spectrum.
And that's a great point. That's one of the things I talk about with respect to the SAT, which is that doesn't just involve English and math. That goes across the entire school. Every teacher teaches reading skills to some degree or another. Almost every teacher teaches math skills in one form or another, you know? So it's a larger collaboration in terms of the whole school, seeing these scores and understanding what we need to do to help kids be more successful.
I definitely agree that there's a motivational aspect, and I think that my kids didn't probably have it to some degree this year. I wonder if, like, at the principal level, you know, at all the schools, I wonder if during your principal meetings that there could be some sharing about how can you motivate students even better.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I feel like other schools must have some good ideas to try.
Yeah.
I think about Smarties.
I was gonna say,
There you
I think
go.
too, I mean,
Little sugar
it's
rush.
one data point.
Right.
You
right.
know, it's
Right.
one data point. We do assessments all the time on our kids. We
Yeah.
do teacher created assessments. So, you know, this isn't the end all be all of how our kids are doing. So
And
that's important to remember.
That's a great
too.
comment, because one of the things we've talked about is how well our students do in their post-Campbell experiences. And when you look at our college success rate, which I'm really interested in seeing the statistics from the clearinghouse, how are our kids doing graduating from four-year colleges on time, or how many are graduating within 5 years or 6 years? That gives you a greater sense of some of those other connections that go on here. Our students, the feedback, the anecdotal feedback on for example, I'll use, you know, Kate in her AP biology. Oh, she struggled with students. It was so difficult, too much work. And then they went away to school and realized, oh my goodness, I've been so well prepared for the things that I'm doing out there. So there's that anecdotal evidence that says, wow, our kids are prepared to do something.
It's one data point, but it's the only thing I get as a parent coming home.
Mhm.
So
And it's colorful.
to me, I don't know what other, I mean, besides their actual assessments for the classes. So to me, it's more, I don't know, maybe it shouldn't be as important, but
I think the point that is one data point is really valid. You don't hang your hat on the one data point, but when you are comparing that one data point to that one data point from other schools,
Mhm.
and it tells a story that we're not pulling our weight,
Right.
I'm worried about that.
Yeah.
So we can't dismiss it as one data point. And if we,
No, I agree.
you
I
know,
agree. We have work to do.
we have work to do. And so, you know, great, you know, we want to triangulate. We want more than one data point, but the one bothers us. And so zeroing in on it is not a bad thing either.
But the kids don't have to take physics.
No,
Tom didn't
they
take physics,
don't.
and there's a physics part of the test. It
Mhm.
looks like isn't.
Yeah, but the stuff that's on there, if you look at the weakness, you know, motion, stability, forces, and interactions, I mean, that's Newton's laws. They should understand basic concepts of it. That's not advanced vector.
No.
analysis.
Oh, don't
But
talk.
here's but they had it freshman year, and they had it freshman year, first semester, or second semester. The modulars, however, can continue sophomore year
Yeah.
into junior year in their other science courses. So if they take science of natural disasters, they can still be doing some earth space modulars to sort of get a sort of a refresher.
For 15 minutes once a week.
Right.
In an hour and a half class, that's really,
Right.
that's something you can plan out easy.
And that's why SAS has to get those modules out and available to people more reasonably.
Yeah.
Okay, SATs. So this, I looked at this and I said, oh, this is frustrating because our students did not do as well this year, our juniors. Okay, it's our junior class. Normally we're above the state average.
Yeah.
We're not this year.
No.
That's kind of frustrating to me. We are above the US averages. We're slightly below in the math and a little bit more below in the evidence-based reading and writing. So not happy with this, not totally displeased if we look at the next slide. And this is where we look at our mean score and we talk about students who meet benchmarks. And what it means with the SAT is meeting a benchmark means a student who meets that benchmark has a 75% chance of getting a C or better in a course in that area first semester in college. So if you look at the benchmark score of 480 there, 66% of our kids met the benchmark in English reading and writing. That's not that bad, okay? They're going to get a C or better in college. Look at New Hampshire, 64%, the whole group, 58%. That's a little bit more positive. You look at the math score, 44% of our kids met the benchmark. Not great, certainly room for improvement, but it's not out of line with the state of New Hampshire. And it's not out of line with that whole group. The most, besides math, and math is certainly meaningful, those that met none of the benchmarks, those are your those are the disaffected students. They're the ones who don't care. It's not important to them. And that's the one right there that we have a sense of who are those students. I think part of it is reading. We talk about the science test, the SAT test is very similar. Okay, requires an advanced level of reading, and some of our kids, I think, are really struggling with the
So that's
ability.
a third of the junior class.
That's a third of the junior class.
That's
Met
incoming
neither
seniors.
of those upcoming rising seniors.
Whatever,
Yes.
rising seniors.
Yep, rising seniors.
Wow.
Yep. Yeah, and now it could be the Christmas tree, you know?
Yeah.
The child
Yeah.
that does that. It could be the child that races through and checks off every C letter, and that's okay with me.
I'd be curious to see how that compares. And, the COVID fatigue and everything has certainly had to do with it, but I'd be curious to see how that tracks in years past.
But
Okay,
we make
I'll
every
show you. I'll show
Oh,
you.
okay.
that. Yeah, that's
We
that's
make
in here.
every kid take the SATs,
It's-
even
it's
if
a
they
state-
don't want to go to
It's
college.
a state
if you wanna
required
be-
assessment. That's
Yeah.
correct. Yep. And similarly, we had a larger number of students opt out as well.
Yeah.
About 10%. So if we go to the next slide, this is our seniors scores. So the seniors took them in the fall. They did take them, and this is actually really pretty positive when you look at those scores versus the state. Our ERWs 543 versus 528 versus 523. Our math 512, same as the state average. 508 for the US. Combined score 1054. That's a decent score in an SAT.
And this is the only time my son only took the SATs once,
Correct. Yes.
and that
Yeah,
was.
he should have taken it in the spring of his junior year and then maybe have other
Yeah,
opportunities.
but he
Right.
didn't.
We're
Yeah,
not a
which is-
center, so we don't give the SAT on weekends and those
Yeah.
other times. that they do. So
The rising seniors won't take them again in the fall.
unless they do choose to do it
Their own.
to get a better score. Yep, they won't take it here.
You get more money for college.
But you know what?
A
Only
lot of colleges aren't taking
11
them.
colleges, only 2 required SAT
Yeah.
scores. Of
That's
the
how we are
11 my
too.
son
None of the
applied
ones
to.
we looked
Two.
at took scores.
And we see that connection with the AP testing too. Some
Yeah.
schools aren't giving you credit for an AP score of 4 or 5. Yep. So anyway, if you look at the benchmarks there, meeting both benchmarks, Campbell 52% versus 42% for the state versus 41 for the whole group. Met ERW 75% of our kids versus 69 and 65. Met math 55% of those seniors, 44 for the state 43. Met none 22%.
It's interesting.
I know.
I like
I
this one
wonder
better.
about our.
Taking it-
I know.
wonder
This is the
if our
best one.
students are
Sounds like
taking
we're
these in
ending on a
the
good
fall.
note
I
at
know.
least.
Would they do better if they took them in the fall?
Yeah.
Our current
Right.
juniors. I know.
Give them again.
Okay. You pay for it.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is one of the things that's kind of interesting is these are our senior class that just graduated. It was the first class that took the 4 levels of PSAT up through SAT. If you look at our scores on the class of 2021 there, and you look at the total score at the bottom, it goes from 931 to 943 to 965 to 1054.
Steady improvement.
Steady growth. The only place you don't see growth is math. Between freshman year and sophomore year, it dropped 5 points. And then jumped back up 5 points for the junior year PSAT, and significantly senior year when they took this PSAT. Right. So it's interesting to look across there at the growth, and you see something similar with the class of 2023.
22.
And look down to 22, same thing, not as pronounced. The math stayed the same. The class that concerns me right now, if you look at the PSAT 8-9 on a diagonal coming across, you'll see 931, 924, a little dip, 921, a little dip, 873.
That's
A
very-
significant dip on that total score. Again, this was our 8th grade class in middle school that lost a third of their
Right.
year, and we're in a hybrid teaching situation, so they now have a chance to face with teachers and all
Yeah.
that sort of stuff. Now, we got a lot of great freshmen. Don't let that sort of form your opinion that the class is a lousy
Mean
class.
scores.
There's great kids there, but there's a lot of numbers in there that we need to take a look at to figure out what's going on with that group of kids.
Can you show us this again next year? Because I'll be interested if it has
Oh,
the same.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
One thing though, the class of 22 is the rising seniors. So your numbers.
Oh, I
are-
just,
So
yeah.
it's 22, 23, 24.
Right.
Yeah,
That's correct.
22. Yeah,
Yep.
I blew that up. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
In fact, it should be 22, 23, 24, not
Yeah.
23, 24, 25.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
Just racing ahead.
You look at lots of
Yeah,
numbers.
don't
and
let it
stuff,
happen
it's
again.
ambiguous. So anyway, this to me was something that there was sort of an interesting piece of information to see, at least in terms of we can monitor how kids are doing over time.
I think they get comfortable. The format of it, like having the 8-9 PSAT, and then having them take it every year. They're prepared for the
Yep,
SAT. It's
they-
not a brand new thing that they
No,
haven't seen
absolutely.
before. So I
Yep.
think that's
Sure.
a smart
Okay.
idea.
And the proof is in the numbers,
Right.
and it's really that it's the first time that we have all of that. So,
Yeah.
you can, my eyes going diagonally, I'm cross-referencing, there's all sorts of stuff that you can
Right.
pull out of this chart.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, if you question the value of taking the PSAT in 9th and 10th grade, I think this chart helps answer
Yeah.
why we do it.
And it gives us a chance along the way to look at these numbers and say, okay,
Mhm.
where are we okay? Where are we struggling?
Mhm.
So if we move on, okay, takeaways, you were just talking about demonstrating growth over time. Junior class scored better than the state and national averages on the benchmarks. Senior class, both the mean score, but also on the benchmarks did really well. Certainly the challenges being below the state average it's discouraging to me. And to me, this is why this is a school-wide, we need to look at the school-wide, but the 33% of our juniors, looking at those students and figuring out, what are the challenges for those kids? And then the current rising sophomores and, who do we need to target? What do we need to target? So again, this comes to a couple of different things. One is a assessment data committee. Kim Barnett, who's doing she's doing her practicum for a school principal certification. So she and I are going to be working a lot this year together. And so she agreed to take on the assessment data committee. So she and I are working next week. We're going to get together for a couple of hours and work on sort of preschool planning, looking at the data and start targeting both sort of the subject matter data, but also the student matter data, and trying to sort of figure out, okay, how do we want to get this out to the various groups around the school. And then, again, target students for assistance, paid particular attention to the rising sophomore class, and then ultimately use the PLCs. We want to make sure that we can get SAT type assessments so that kids have practices, and not just the one shot in the fall when they take the PSATs, but over the course of the year within other classes. So AP testing. So the left box there is the total number of students over the past 5 years who have earned scores of 3 or better. If you look at that, it bounces up and down between 75% to 71% this past year. It's a fairly solid number. It's right in the range of what many schools have in terms of the numbers that kids are being successful. One of the things we've seen this past year was a real drop-off in students taking the AP exams. And actually, it was a significant number of students who weren't taking the AP classes. So we had 41 students who took 66 exams. But you look at those 41 students, back 5 years ago, we were at 44. We jumped up to the mid-70s and dropped down a little bit. I'm not sure why we have fewer numbers of students taking them, although this past year we had a number of students who decided at the last minute that they weren't going to take their exams, okay? And the AP offered them the chance to get their money back. Typically, that's not the case. You look at the number of exams, we went from 76 5 years ago up in the 130 at a max, down to 66, which is a little bit concerning. I mean, there are some reasons behind that. And again, the number of students out of those 49 who scored 3 or better is 29 students. So now we get to look at the subject-specific matter, and I think this is really worthwhile data to look at. This is our AP Bio course. We had a total. Actually, I don't know the number of students that enrolled. The teacher who is teaching it is no longer with us. They removed her from last year's schedule, so I couldn't look at her schedule to find that information out. But the scores this class were lower than they normally are. Normally, this is a class who does much better than this. And I think one of the contributing factors to that is the teacher wasn't in the school building during the year. It was all
Also, we had the 4x4 scheduling
Correct.
this year.
Yes.
So, I'm kind of not surprised to see lower scores this year because some of the kids took the course in the fall semester and didn't have the test until the
Correct.
spring.
Yeah.
Or was halfway through
Yeah.
the class when the test happened in the spring.
correct. And you'll see concerns about that with a couple of the other sets
Yeah.
of scores.
Yeah.
Yep. So if we can scroll forward to chemistry, I put in the notes on the left side. This is the first time for this teacher teaching chemistry. It's the first time we've offered the class. We actually had a student take it back last year and earn a 3 on it. I spoke with Joanne already. She was really frustrated when she looked at these scores. And, well, she's anticipating having more 3s, 4s, and 5s.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, but a good part of that conversation involved her stepping back and not beating herself up for a couple of reasons. She's tight with AP chemistry teachers around the state, and so she's had conversations already with a number of them, and they said, "You got 3 and 4s? I got nothing that high." Okay, it's a really challenging test. Number one. Joanne has recognized there's certain things she needs to do early in the school year in terms of rigor, in terms of homework, in terms of accountability placed on students. And so she's positive that this is going to be a little bit different next year. I think it's interesting, though, that 12 of her 13 students took the AP exam. You'll see that in some of those other courses, not that same commitment by students to this. So if we flip to the next one, AP Stats. AP Stats was I think this was the second time for this teacher teaching this. Improved scores, last year. And last year, the teacher, we took over the course midway through the year, had to be sent to a 2-day workshop out in Kansas City, and struggled but held his own. Had a student who got a 4 last year. The challenge for this teacher, and if you look at that growth between last year and this year, 1.83 overall score to 2.83, that's a tremendous jump up. And it's the same number of students. So there was a little patting on the back saying we did okay. I think what's really interesting is if you look at the numbers who took the course previously, okay, we had a charming, dynamic teacher that kids would take just because they wanted to be in that teacher's classroom. Not necessarily because they wanted to meet the rigors of an AP course. If you look at the scores along there, they're not outstanding scores, okay? And Sean brings him up to a 2.83 average and he's moving his way towards, my hope is, towards building the program and improving the scores.
Is that our only statistics class?
What's that?
That's our only statistics class.
No, we have a statistics and an AP statistics.
Okay.
I
So
thought
the-
there was an honors one.
You can take statistics. No, I'm not sure you can take it as an honors because we offer it as an AP course. So
Oh, no, my son
statistics
took
is
it on VLAX.
statistics.
He took
Okay.
honors on VLAX, yeah,
Okay.
which was good too, but
That
this
would
is,
make sense. Yep.
So there were 22 students in the class and only 6
Well,
took the test?
there's the sticking point here. Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay. Right. We want more students to be taking the test.
When did that class run? Was it in the fall?
No, that was in the spring.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, one was in the spring. I'd have to look back and see. There might have been two.
Okay.
One first semester, one second semester.
but Bill, I think it is interesting, the 4s and 5s, even with that dynamic teacher,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm being really sarcastic when I'm saying that, that's interesting.
Yes.
Because even with all those kids, and he got the same scores as our
Yes.
new teacher.
I know. And that prior teacher was a great teacher. But he drew kids in. Lots of kids want to take AP statistics. That cult of personality worked for him really well. Yep. So Calc AB, I don't know why I go over this every year.
The same.
Okay. Just Diane does an incredible job. Our scores were a little bit lower this year, but no 2s, no 1s.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's
Now,
commendable.
Keep in mind, though, it is a daily class, okay? So it meets daily all year long. So she has a lot of time, but she understands what the kids need to know and do to be successful. Yep, she's a remarkable teacher. 11 out of the 13 took the Calc AB. If we go to the next one, it's the Calc BC. Yep, and all 4 took it. And scores are 3.5. This is a little unique group because she teaches them at the same time, A, B, and BC. So a little bit of a struggle along the way, but everybody was 3 or better. Computer science was a VLAX student, took the course on VLAX. Okay, one got a 3. Yep. English Lit and composition. This is Tina, I'll go back to your comment about semester 1 versus semester 2.
Wow.
This was a course that was taught during semester 1, and it was a challenge for the teacher to manage the materials, the work, the kids struggling in other courses, and yet 7 of the kids took the exam. 2 of the 3 that didn't take it were amongst the top 10 students at Campbell High School, didn't take the AP exam.
So it might have been like a little.
Oh,
higher.
if there's no doubt in my mind, had those students taken it, and both of them were in a position their schools did not give credit for AP courses. So there's no question in my mind would have a 5 and a 4, or a 4 and a 3, which would totally skew those back into what would be a normal range. Because if you look at 2019, 2020, 2019 was when he first started teaching this class, and you look at the growth from 2019 to 2020, 18 students got 2s. The next year, 5 students got 2s, and we jumped from 4 got 3s to 10 got 3s. We stayed in the same range with the 4s, and 1 student got a 5. So there, this was the anomalous year. This was the year that didn't fit the pattern. It was the year that two kids didn't take it. That had they done so, yeah, it would be I think a different spot looking at these scores. Here's first time running this course.
With a dynamic teacher.
Yeah.
With the dynamic teacher, first semester, but continued to offer students assistance and all of that during second semester. So a little different results.
That's amazing.
Now the
That's really
piece to this that's I think important. First time teaching it, but taught AP U.S. history the year before. Understood the format, understood the types of questions, understood how to figure out how to get kids to move along. And I talked with Nate about this, and he said that I held those kids to the highest standards from the very beginning to the very end, and they weren't doing well. Their grades weren't good. They struggled. They were resistant. And he said, but along the way, that's when you see students growing and becoming able to meet those higher expectations that we have for them. Still didn't have 2 students take the exam. But he said he also, interesting piece, is the students that scored in the 2 area could have done better with a little bit more commitment, a little bit more listening to him along the way. Yeah. Yep.
So impressive.
I bristle at the 4x4 comment, to be honest, because I've seen the 4x4 work very successfully in AP. So, again, just comparing this course, the English Lit, and the U.S. government ran exactly the same.
Yeah.
So it's, we have to be careful about blaming things like structures that we've created on it, right? So just keep
Well,
that
let me
in
ask you
mind.
this, how many of the same kids are taking all of these tests?
Yeah.
So if they're taking 4 AP tests, they're gonna put all their energy in biology or whatever, and maybe they don't feel the best in English, so they're gonna, do you know what I mean? It's gotta be the same kids.
We had again, students enrolled in 3 AP courses decided to take only 1 AP test.
Right.
So if you look at that 29 students versus 41 students, 29 students, took and passed multiple tests.
Yeah.
41, however,
Mm.
was the total number. So, yeah.
U.S. history.
Doesn't want to move? Oh, I'm sorry.
This is-
Yeah,
I
yes,
know,
I was
I
looking
did-
at U.S.
Yeah.
So the first-time teacher, struggled a little bit. Again, we're looking at, the semester and the time and those things are a concern. 3 students didn't take the test. If you look at prior years, our numbers were pretty consistent, decent. This, I think is a learning curve here, and we've got some growing to do, but I think this is a teacher who's going to manage U.S. history well without any challenges.
It was the same teacher teaching it prior to 2000,
Prior to,
or they've been different
So,
teachers?
no, we had Heidi Paris was teaching it for a couple of years, and then Nate took it over, and now Dave.
So it's been like this, kind of interesting.
So and Nate took it over in 2020.
Correct. Yep.
So
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
looking at the expectations and
hmm
he has a pretty good grasp on.
It's not an easy course. It's
None of,
yeah.
none of these are easy
No,
courses. No,
to teach.
I didn't take AP courses in high school. But and so just some fun notes here. Art history, we had a student take the course through Bilax score 3. Environmental science, you may have been looking for that. That did not run this past school year. Programming 2 did not run. This is computer science through Project Lead the Way. It qualifies students to take the AP exam, but it's not designated an AP course, but didn't run this past year. And then Spanish language and culture, we didn't run as well. So the takeaways, relative strengths, biology, stats, government politics, Calc A, B, and BC, and a large number of students, it says, but it really should be students taking exams in most courses. And then relative challenges, scores, English, US history, and then the number of students taking exams in statistics. And so I'll have a conversation with that teacher and see what we can do about motivating them. And then next steps, I've already begun this, is meeting with individual teachers to discuss performance. And then we'll spend some time assisting them analyzing and determining strengths and challenges, opportunities. One of the things I want to do is give them a chance to speak with each other, because those students who have had success need to have an opportunity to talk about what worked and the struggles, what the struggles are, to share some of those ideas. And I also think that we need to foster other teachers' use of AP type questions, because these really are, they're rigorous, they're interesting, they're great ways to get kids to think deeply about topics. And we've sent a couple of teachers to AP workshops this summer who aren't going to be teaching this year, but who are interested in the programs and are interested in what this can do for their classes. And I know when I taught AP, it made me a better teacher in my other classes, for sure.
I will say that, and I'm going to say this in part because Noah's sitting right here as well. I had this conversation with the social studies department this afternoon when they were here for working on curriculum during Live to Learn. We now have all 4 of those teachers trained in one of the 2 AP history courses. And, I really am I'm excited to see what they can do with that, because, we talked about the intentionality of setting up curriculum and assessments to using the same kind of models and the higher level rigor questions and things of that nature. So,
No pressure.
yeah, no, not at all. I just said that publicly.
I think it's helpful too when an entire department gets trained and embraces, like, this is our capstone.
Yeah.
So starting in 9th grade, you're teaching with that end in mind. And so that vertical progression sort of gets embraced. And so it provides that better
We have a
opportunity.
nice cohesive group, good personalities, and yeah.
I mean, the social studies department, just to single them out, Noah, have been in all 7 days of Live to Learn, correct? So, you're talking about a department that embraced like additional PD and opportunities to work together on
And
curriculum
they did it
development.
as a department. We've had other groups do that. They are the only ones that came in as a full department all 7 days.
You guys are coming tomorrow, right?
Now they may
At
not.
least 6 of the 7 days.
So we got a shout out.
But before we move on, because what I'm hoping is a tight segue between the assessment overview. So also with the 7 days of Live to Learn, the admin team has been hunkered down. We started the work on looking at assessments back in June with round 1, and continue that forward. We also started the work of saying, what does this tell us and how do we write goals? So before moving on to the goal piece, I just wanted to see if the board had questions on the assessment part that were not addressed by the principals. Then let us move into, if you're ready for it, the goal piece. The first link goes to the school board goals, which, if you remember, there were the 5 broad areas, and then each of the goals had 3 specific indicators that you were looking at. So it's really the love of learning, the great teachers, the post-secondary pathways, the facility improvements, and then community engagement. So those were the broad strokes that they gave us, with more specific indicators that you were asking us to focus on. So working with that, we spent time as an admin team thinking about what does the data tell us. And there was more than just those scores, by the way. We had more indicators that we were looking at, but what does that tell us, and how do we then focus on specific goals and action steps to take? So I'm going to actually cycle back to the principals. And Dan, if you want to come up to the table, I'll orient the board to what we have. So it is a spreadsheet. It's outlined between, there are 4 tabs at the bottom, 3 for the school, and then 1 for the district overall to focus on. And I asked the principals, I said, look, try to keep this tight, 3, 4 goals, things that we can really show some action on. Because if we write a goal for each indicator, now all of a sudden you have 15 things you're tracking per school. It's too overwhelming. Like, where are we going to really be able to show some improvement and growth and nail that down? So you have the first column are the school goals. It's then linked back to the board goal. And in many cases, it's overarching. So it hits more than one goal. Which indicator does it seem most closely aligned to? Again, we're not going to hit all the indicators because these are annual goals. So, you have a 3-year goal document, but we have to take them in pieces and bites, if you would. What are the action steps? What will we do in the next year? And finally, what are the measurements? This is still a draft.
Yeah.
We're bringing it forward to you. It hasn't gone to staff yet, but when we're going to present it tonight, we'll revisit it the next meeting. And this will really give the marching orders, if you would, to how the principals will then lay out the scope of the year. So it continues to be a draft and a work in progress.
Just in the interest of time, it's already 7:25, so I just want to be, mindful of everybody's time. So is tonight just a brief overview? Are we gonna? I don't know if we need to get into the details.
I'll do 2 minutes.
Okay.
And if we each do about 2 minutes,
That's
just so you get a flavor of what's there, and then I want the board to digest it. And if you're sitting there saying, well, wait a second, this is way off base. I just heard this and you're going there.
Okay.
Or if you see like a big gaping hole, we missed something, like the board's goals, you really thought we were going to do this and instead we're over here, or we missed it completely. Now's the chance to sort of point that out so that we can continue to refine this to bring back on August 18th.
Great.
So
Thank you.
Dan's got three main focuses, and notice the way it's laid out: PLC, SEL, work study practices. So go.
So basically, the goal of the goals was to actually create goals that would be worked on concurrently, at the same time. And so first off, you get into the structure, which is we want to recommit to bringing back and strengthening the structure of our PLCs. And one of the easiest ways to actually do that is to give them the thing to work on, as opposed to we're going to do PLCs and then have to figure out what you're going to work on. So two target areas. First off, we already mentioned that some of that work will be based on the SAS scores and the assessment data that we have. But two other areas that we've already made steps to, so we figured we might as well make goals out of them, is SEL based on the castle. And I think a lot of that is going to be established. One, we have our school counselor, Jen Hayes, who's going into second year, so she's got some momentum going, as well as bringing on the new set teacher. And when we say SEL, we're thinking broad terms. So we're not just talking emotional stuff. We're really talking about those collaboration skills, those interpersonal skills, being able to work through and problem solve on their own. So building up with a small core this summer, which will start with some of those activities that can be done in the classroom. And I believe they're going to frame them as like 1 minute, 5 minute, 10-minute things that you can do, and just kind of provide them to teachers. And then we could check into the thing through. The third one I want to focus on just a little bit more, which is we called it work study practices, but it's more than what we normally refer to as work study practices. These are really, really specific things. It's something I've done at a previous school, and I want to do it again with this school, which is that oftentimes elementary conversations tend to go to the point of the kids in this class can't even do X, Y, Z, sharpen their pencil,
Right.
unpack their bag, da, da, da. And no one ever stops to think, well, did they teach them how to sharpen their pencil? Did they? And so I want to really lay out in an explicit kind of a ladder or framework of what is done at kindergarten, what is done at first grade. When are they taught how to sit in a circle? When are they taught how to sharpen their pencil? When is the expectation that they can actually pack and unpack their bag, independently, so that we can lay it all out? And so then second grade can go, okay, I know that my incoming the first graders, when they come to me, should be able to do X, Y, and Z. And I'm going to make sure they can do A, B, and C before I send them off to third grade. And it really just starts with what's everything that we want our kids to know before
That's
they
awesome.
leave. Before they leave in fourth grade,
Right.
as independent middle schoolers, they should be able to do these life tasks, if you will, or school tasks, and then spread it out where it's going to get done and when it's going to be kind of beginning, developed, and mastered. So we're going to come up with that framework. And it can be done in just a series of very casual conversations and thoughtful dialogue. So those are my three goals. Hopefully that was less than 2 minutes.
2:45.
I knew you.
But whose time?
Timekeeper.
Yeah, just to one of your points when you said, has the child been taught this? The first thing that came to mind was the argument as far as the younger children wearing a mask.
Mhm.
They'll never do it. They can't. They won't leave them on.
Yeah.
And they were successful.
You were successful. Yep.
It's a matter of teaching and
And
just
expectations.
And
Yeah.
expectations.
But and I find myself
expectations.
falling into the trap of I can't believe the kids can't X, and not saying, hey, did you teach them how to do X last year? Because sometimes they'll say, oh no, we never got to that. And be like, well, no wonder they can't.
Right. Yeah, no, that was a good point too.
All right, so Tom has a few more goals, but it's focused on SEL, personalization, and community.
Okay, thank you. I'm on the clock. All right, so actually, I will say SEL and personalization, there's some overlap there. So while there are 5, there is a lot of overlap. The first one is similar actually to Dan's, integrate SEL strategies through our counseling, programming, our PBIS program, and our PLC model. Our counselors are really critical in this, and I met with them this summer to talk about this. Not only will they be supporting the teams with this, and we capitalizing on the best block time with this, but they're also going to be tracking individual personalizing with each grade level. So That's exciting. Personalizing, let's see, second goal, examine learning blocks at the middle school and how to best meet the needs of our students. So this is ongoing. We did a lot of work this spring into the summer on our schedule. We are continuing to look at our schedule to how can we not just look at our schedule, but how can we look at the real pillars of our program designed around the needs of middle school students, and then align it to what those needs are. And we've used resources like the Parker School model and other resources to do that examination. We'll continue to do so. Plan and instruct with curriculum connections across content areas. I'm going to stop right there. I already mentioned those cross-content connections and how important that is in our PLC grade level meetings. Personalized support for students during Best Block. Best Block is revamped this year. As I mentioned, we have some technology to help support that, and that will be much more personalized. And then increase awareness of strengths and needs at LMS. That really is taken right off the board goal about community. And there are some sort of a toss salad of things there that we're going to be doing to put communication and what we're doing at the middle school out there to our community. So those are our main goals. Any questions?
The only question I have is there something in there we can get about the great teachers? Because it's focused very much on love of learning and the community engagement, but I feel like the teachers need a goal too.
So the teachers are involved in all these goals. The PLC model is reliant on our grade level team and structure. So I can probably
Maybe it's just adding it.
Yeah, I can
you know,
probably
like-
reframe it at the beginning, that left column where personalization. I think there's some personalization / love of learning, or the link school board goal. I think some of that we could because if you look at the second
highly
column,
engaged in-person learning, that's definitely teachers.
right, and the second column linked to the board goal of love of learning. So I think we can just
Right.
sort of reframe it
Okay.
in that first column.
Good on middle
Sounds
school?
good.
How much time, Brian?
About 10 seconds over.
All right.
Oh, boy.
Sorry.
There's the long-winded one, right?
You got to make up 35 seconds.
Okay. So three goals this year. First one, utilizing our PLCs more regularly, more appropriately, specifically using data. That's going to require reinvigoration of our data and assessment team, and an engagement with them to provide that data to the PLCs. And the goal really is to take those assessment scores and bring them up to where they should be. Okay. So making sure it's targeted for students, targeted for curriculum and for program development. Our second one that I think is really important now is to reframe and redevelop our advisory program for a couple of reasons. One is to make sure that we're committed to advisory as an important part of personalizing and connecting, but more importantly, to address a lot of the sort of other needs of students that we don't necessarily, it provides a great vehicle for addressing those social, emotional, whole child stuff. As important is using that time and developing that either by the start of the second quarter or the start of the second semester to provide for both enrichment and for remediation and competency recovery for kids, a built-in process within the school.
Sure,
And our SAS system has the opportunity and the availability for teachers to drag kids into their places, to meet with them, to make sure that they can recover appropriately.
It's advisory.
During an advisory time, yep.
Then
So
where
it-
their advisory
it would be a-
advisees going to be.
It would be a split time between lunch and advisory, and some students won't have to go to their advisory. There'll be other opportunities with enrichment for them to go to other places around the
I'd
school.
like to see the kids stay in one place for advisory instead of roaming around the hallways.
In most cases, they will.
Yeah.
Okay, but the goal is to develop a program where we can get them the opportunity to move to other places where they do need to be. And we don't have that currently.
No.
We don't have an easy process for dragging a kid to a
Yeah.
teacher.
Is the advisory schedule still the same? Is it a 22-minute block?
We're looking at that right now.
Okay.
We're thinking a little bit about maybe 4 10s to start off with, and not go to the 22-minute one. Want to have a conversation with the other members of the admin team and a couple of key staff members. So the third one is COVID destroyed our ability to communicate and to involve parents in the community at CHS. So my last one is about making sure that we reconnect the community back into Campbell High School. And so targeting parents, targeting community members, and making sure that we have the opportunity to both be involved with them in terms of our supporting programs, but also they have an opportunity to be involved with us.
Can I make a request?
What's that?
Can I make a request?
Sure.
Can you do the coffee with admins not at 7 in the morning?
We're looking at doing those differently. We're
Okay.
totally differently because they don't work. We haven't had partly COVID, but we haven't had the numbers. So the idea is maybe we go to a football game. We provide administrative. We're going to be at the football game. We want you to come by and say hello to us. Or maybe it's at the concert beforehand for 15 minutes. Come speak with the administrators there. Maybe it's at a National Art Honor Society. Come in, go to the induction, come talk to the administrators and provide other opportunities as one vehicle for doing this.
I like that. Good idea.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you.
How'd I do?
And then the last tab
It's about
is,
as bad as Dan, so.
You framed it differently. As good as Dan.
Not as good as Tom.
Not as good as Tom.
and then the last tab is the district tab. So,
It's a long one.
wow. Double fisted. It's like, we're here. The district tab, what I looked at after reading what the schools had developed, I realized that the facility piece was something that the schools were not embracing. And honestly, that's a major focus of our work right now in the district office, because between the LMS building upgrades that are ongoing this summer and then preparing for the GMS project with some real clear deadlines that are on the cusp for us, I focus on those as the things we need to do and to do well in the year ahead. So it doesn't mean that we're not paying attention to supporting a whole variety of aspects that are there. But I believe part of it is the buildings are going to be driving a lot of that work. The PLC work, they're going to drive. We'll provide support. They're driving it. But we're driving the LMS upgrades, and we're driving the GMS architect selection and then preliminary scope and design. And you can see there's some really clear deadlines that we need to meet. And I think there's an entire community engagement piece around those projects that we need to take ownership over to make sure that we do those successfully. So I kept our slides pretty focused in the way that I outlined that.
Does administration and Mary and even you, Dr. Jetty, do you pop into PLC meetings? I'm sure you do, Mary.
I typically have as asked.
Yeah, I was just curious.
But what we are trying to structure a little bit more is more intentional meetings, meeting with the CFs, and having a monthly PLC with them. And I'm hoping to be able to set up something similar with the team leaders at the middle school.
Awesome.
To be able to just have that continued conversation.
Great.
But to answer for the principals, they do pop in. In fact, they participate in the PLCs at that level. So, that's really the appropriate place where that's how they keep a handle on what's going
Yeah, you
on.
get a vibe on what's going on, struggles. Yeah, absolutely. It's appreciated. Or maybe not.
So, Tracy Origin, how'd I do on time, Brian?
Very well.
Thank you. Just saying.
Running gag.
But trace this back to our retreat. We established the goals. We fine-tuned them. We did look at what you had on the Jamboard slides. And I'm hoping that you see that this is really structured, focused, school-based work to do in the year ahead, district-based work to do in the year ahead, and that we'll follow through on that. We'll be back at it. We'll revise the goals for the year after, because you do have 3-year goals, so it's something that we'll keep working on. But the chance to redirect us is between now and August 18th, because coming out of August 18th, and I don't know that we need approval on these as much as agreement that we're on task and in alignment, at which point this will drive a lot of the opening days work for the principals in the school. So, and the work that will then unfold.
think this is good.
All right. Thank you for that.
Thank you for that. All right. That brings us to the school handbooks, which we will be approving at the next meeting.
Right. So just to tee this up, basically you have the handbooks outlined. There are still a few revisions that are being made to those. Part of it is we're hinging on the policy improvement, policy approval, because those policies are relative to discipline, and a lot of that has to end up in the handbook. So it's sort of one comes after the other here. The other piece is that you'll see that those policies have been rewritten in sort of this progressive discipline mode. It's really intended to be more, how do we support students in their learning and growth as they work through what the expectations are. So I want to just highlight for a second this progressive discipline chart. We stole this from another district and sort of modified it.
Borrowed it?
Modeled it, stole it, whatever. Yeah. We're inspired by.
Inspired by,
Yeah.
that's
Okay. But basically what we were trying to get to is sort of this idea of a first offense, second offense, what's handled at school, teacher level, what's handled at the office level, et cetera. So, and we're still working on this. So this is one example of the type of thing that we're going to incorporate into the handbook. This isn't brand new. It was in the handbooks, but it wasn't quite as clean. It wasn't quite as spelled out in this manner. And we do think that this will make it more clear to parents, to students themselves, and even to the admin team, how to respond to a situation that ends up occurring. So
Do we even have teacher detentions? Or are they just office detentions?
we have teacher detentions. Yeah. I mean, it's driven by the individual teacher.
Okay.
And it can vary from an after-school detention to, other times during the day. But, to counsel with a student, detention is a way to get after that.
I like this idea because it fosters consistency from
Yes.
student to student,
School to school.
and school to school.
So they can have their phone on their person, they just can't take it out, right? Is
Well, it depends what school.
Not a do
that- Sure. At LMS, you can have it, but you just can't take it out.
So I guess this is sort of like what we did with the discipline policies. Here's your first glimpse. The items, let's see if I got this right. Mike said the items that are in green in the high school handbook are the things he's still working on. The items that are in red are the things he's deleting and taking out. So you sort of can see the editing process that's unfolding, but they will be finalized for the August 18th meeting, and we're going to look for a vote there. So again, if you see something and flag it, send the email off to the school principal at this
Is
point. So that
everything
we
in the
can,
LMS and GMS handbook in yellow that's different? Because it just doesn't look like there's a whole lot that's been changed from year to year, and maybe that's true, but I just noticed CHS had a lot more.
So
highlighted.
GMS, if it's in yellow, it still needs to be, you're not gonna see much. But if you scroll down, because Maura creates it, she has a whole list of changes made so that when parents who are moving it, if it's your second year, if you want to, if you're already familiar with it, you can go to changes in this year's handbook. So I believe it's the last
Is that at
page.
the end? Oh,
I
Is
like
this
that.
going to be in every,
missed that.
this new one going to be in every handbook?
the progressive chart,
Yeah,
that's the goal.
What's it called?
but it's going to be the same in every one.
Well, there'll be
Yeah.
nuances. I mean, cell phone violations at
Yeah.
GMS aren't the same as,
But like forgery, that should be a 0, but it
Oh,
depends
I
to the
see.
teacher. What is, I don't know.
forgery is like a fake dismissal note.
Yeah.
So that's not a 0. It's
I was thinking it was like plagiarism. It's forgery.
Council versus.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
there's still a lot of room for,
Yeah.
Okay. Looks good. So we'll review that.
So can I ask a couple questions because we're gonna approve them next time, right? So just real quick on the LMS one, page 23. I mean, just for clarification, you said, at 722, you can't carry any electronics. They'll be carrying the Chromebooks.
Is Martha doing
Like that
this?
too, carrying electronic devices.
And then in the high school, is there a reason why all the Alice information is not going to be in the handbook? That's what it says. There's like a whole page that's, let me go to yours. It's like on page, what's on, 49.
Did he delete it?
No, it just says it's,
What does it say?
gotta go there.
Mike's there.
What's that?
Page
Yeah.
49.
Oh, appears online, but not on this doc.
I'm gonna have to talk with Mike about that.
Is that in the other two? Is the Alice information in the other two handbooks?
I honestly can't recall.
Yeah, I don't remember either.
Well, and all of the information in red is actually on the emergency chart that's in every classroom. So it doesn't mean it can't be replicated in the handbook, but
So I'm wondering why they wouldn't put it in the handbook. You think it would be in there?
it does have another place.
That's a
So
lot of different places.
Yeah.
I wonder if links would,
Yours?
49.
23.
23.
Michelle, are those your notes this appears online? or-
no, I have not
well,
touched those.
that's Mike. Yep.
All right, I'll talk with him about that and have him get back to you. I'm not sure what that's about.
And the last thing I have is for actually all three schools, because I thought we had this discussion before. I know we have this little cute cutout chart, excuse me, the dress code. And it doesn't, I know it says it's got to cover the whole area, but we talked about that as long as it covered the genitals, that, so like, I don't know, like a crop shirt is okay, correct?
No. Well,
Crop
I
shirts are not
I saw
okay.
them all.
Well, we had a discussion about this, because I brought it up another time. Because even in the description, as far as what it covers, or what it says that it covers, it doesn't say that you can't expose to your belly button.
Yeah, it says
The
armpit
picture.
to armpit, all the way down to,
Yeah, but then it says, clothing must cover the area from the armpit across to the other armpit, extend low enough to fully cover the private parts, including underwear, buttocks, genital area. See image.
Yeah.
It shows the image, but okay, so if that part of the shirt's not there,
and
it's still following dress code.
no, it's not.
Armpit to armpit down to
It doesn't.
covering the.
No, it says armpit to armpit, across the other armpit, extended low enough to fully cover
Right.
private parts.
All
Armpit
the way
to
down.
armpit, extended low enough.
And
to
what is
cover all
that? What is the
private parts.
what does the caption say by the
It
side?
says must cover entire area from armpit to, I don't want to call that mid thigh, but
How is that
the answer
going
is it should be,
Must
Because that was
cover
the
entire
entire
area
area.
as
It's not being
described.
What's that?
Must cover entire area as described.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's
To me, I was clear that there's no crop shirts. It just looks.
that is correct.
yeah. no
Again,
crop
there's a
shirt.
dress code at LMS. Is it Mrs. Thayer?
I saw a lot of bare midriffs
In the middle
in my
school?
travels, middle school and high school. Yeah.
But it's a fine
It seems
line
like
for.
we've kind of tampered down the dress code to be kind of very simplistic and more freeing for a lot of clothing items. But that's one area that we decided to stick with.
But it's hard for a male vice principal to enforce it.
No, it's not.
No.
I was one.
No,
And I
it
was
used to be the
It's not.
nurse.
When it's that clear, it shouldn't be hard.
Right.
You pick them up when they come in the door in the morning. Bang, bang,
Just
bang,
show them
over
the
there.
picture.
Right.
The problem is though, is that we're not necessarily seeing every child as they walk in, but the other piece is, and this is sort of my administrative mind speaking, is you have to have faculty who are willing to say.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't think we do. Yeah.
And there's a hesitancy, and I don't agree with you that as a male, you can't. I can
Every
say-
male teacher I work with, maybe not principals,
Yes,
won't
no.
go there.
Well,
It shouldn't be a
you
gender
just
issue.
Go to the office. It's that simple. I don't have to explain it, just go to the office. show the desk.
I mean, we used to, when I was in AP, it wasn't even, the teacher wouldn't even address it with the kid. They would just email the office.
That's what
So
it was like when
out of
I
dress
first
code.
started at Campbell.
I'm dragging them out of
Yeah.
class.
Yeah.
But I think that's
We
in the
show up.
policy as well. I think the
The
steps
teachers
are
don't
outlined in
need to address it. They just need to have so-and-so call them down the office so they don't feel uncomfortable
Well,
doing it.
And exactly, if you remember, the policy also went to a more discreet, you don't call the kid out verbally and it's not about
Right.
shaming. It's just, That's, yeah, exactly.
Right.
And but it does need to be addressed. You can't just go through the day.
Mhm.
Because you get a child who at the end of the day, finally you're seeing them going, how did you get away with
Mhm.
that?
And from there, their friends see that they got away with it, and it's a consistency thing.
Mm-hmm.
What are the hours of LMS? Is it 7:15 to 2:05? I thought maybe that changed.
The new days, yeah, 7:15 to 2:05.
Okay.
That needs to be blasted everywhere.
Okay, I want to make sure that was correct.
That needs to be blasted
Yeah.
everywhere. That needs to be blasted everywhere.
Yeah.
That's through my newsletter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else on handbooks?
All right. So, thank you, principals. That was a lot of work tonight.
Very good.
What, you don't want to stay?
You can stay.
No,
I'm shocked.
I want to eat dinner.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on to the BA report. Did everybody have a chance to review that? Yep. I didn't see any surprises or.
Read it sideways.
You
Did
can
it
lay
come up
down.
sideways? Oh,
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to.
It's all right.
The numbers look better that way.
Yeah.
So I can send that over to the budget committee, right?
Yes, you can.
That report and the attachments.
you can, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna do that. Good night.
Thanks for
Right.
coming.
Good night, Noah. So we have some policies for approval. We have, I'll just make a motion. Policy JIC, JICD, JICDD, and JICK. Student code of conduct, student conduct, discipline, due process, student discipline, out of school actions, pupil safety and violence prevention, and bullying. So I'll make a motion to approve all of those.
Second.
Any discussion? Questions or comments? This is a second reading, right?
Correct. No, this is a first reading.
First reading.
You
Okay.
had them for preview. The admin team made minor tweaks and adjustments. It was nothing substantially
But
significant.
we want these to go in the handbook.
So do you want to waive the second?
Can we make, when you make the motion, can we put these in the handbook and then consider it a second reading when you approve the handbooks?
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, we'll just approve the second read before we approve the handbooks. So
Okay.
just put the
Yeah.
policies first.
Okay. And if anything has to be revised, just let me know.
Okay.
If you see something.
I think you have the green light to incorporate them into the handbook.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
And
that's
then
what I
if
really
we
wanted.
adjust,
Yeah.
we'll just double adjust where it is,
Perfect.
but I think you get them in
That
there.
good?
yeah.
Perfect.
All right. Any further discussion or comment?
I just have a question. When I read the policies and I agree with them, but do we have to discuss, and this is just a question for me, when the police get involved? Do you know what I mean? Is that just a whole different thing, like cyberbullying? Do the police ever get involved? I would think they would.
I
Well,
wonder
we,
if that's in that discipline flow chart.
it's actually in the memo of understanding. So
Okay.
remember that we have an MOU,
Okay.
I think it is,
MOU.
with the police department. So, and we follow that in terms of
So
notification.
that doesn't have to be in this policy.
If it escalates to that level of police involvement, you don't get involved unless there's an appeal to
Yeah, because it,
discipline. Right.
And at that point, parents are already notified.
and
so-
we're
Right.
And you kind of have a dual, there's two things happening simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like the school infraction piece, but
Mhm.
like the discipline out for outside of school actions. I mean, the police may be notified before we even know.
Mm-hmm.
So you really have this kind of dual thing happening depending on how, what the situation is and when it's become known.
So if someone's child bullies another child outside of school, do they have to let the school know? Or would the parents let you know? Keep Liz away from Tina. She bullied her online over the summer. Do you know what I mean?
It's that two-way street. with it.
Yeah.
So let's say that happens outside of school.
Mhm.
The police are notified by the family. The police then, because we have an SRO, let us know that this is something. So it's that
Okay.
two-way street that it all depends on
Okay.
when. I mean,
Mhm.
you take something like summer vacation, there could have been an infraction at Brickyard in July
Mhm.
that, well, one of two things. Either it's all resolved and everything's fine by the start of school. Sometimes it's long-standing, not fine, in which case we need to manage that at the school.
Okay.
So it varies greatly on what the situation is.
And I think one of the guiding principles, if I may, is does what happened out of school disrupt
Or
what
impact
happens in school or
learning,
that
yes.
students' ability
To learn,
in
yeah.
school.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
I do have one question on JICD page 5 at the very top. It's one of the grounds for expulsion, only for the following grounds. So my question is, okay, so it says bringing or possessing a firearm as defined in section 921, title 18 within a safe school zone is prohibited under RSA or under the Gun-Free School Zones Act, unless such pupil has written authorization from the superintendent.
To pack heat?
Is there, yeah,
You can
Well-
explain
is there
that.
ever an instance where that would be allowed by
I
you?
asked
So
that question.
I'll give you an
Curious.
example. I had a student for a senior project was restoring a family. It was like a shotgun that had been in the family for 100 years.
Oh.
And so they did that. Well, they needed to bring the artifact in for the presentation,
Okay.
right? So, I mean, I encountered this as a principal. It's like, that's not a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The firing pin was removed. The SRO inspected it. The SRO verified that that was not an operable
Mhm.
firearm. It was brought in and displayed. It was a beautiful restoration that was done on it. So that's an example where we put it in writing. We have a game plan.
Okay,
But,
okay.
you know,
That's a very good example.
but permission to pack heat is a no. To be clear, that's not something we'll be
Generally,
doing.
no.
So, but that gives you an example of why, you know, any rule like this can't be
Yeah.
black and white. You have to
Right.
have that out clause, and that's what it was.
I am so glad I'm not the only one that asked that question.
I know.
Those are reasons for everything. Like I never would
I
have
know.
thought of that.
Right. Okay. All right.
So
So-
when you, when the board does their second reading, there'll be two policies that will have to be rescinded. Okay?
Okay. So this is, we have a motion and a second on the first reading. Any further discussion or questions? How's Heidi doing? Is she still there?
Oh my goodness. I'm sorry. You're looking at me, but I'm looking at I've got the agenda
I
and links
know.
and all. I'm busy over
Oh,
here.
good.
so-
Dark in the campground.
All good.
It's the
Yep, I'm
same
here
kid.
listening.
It's real.
No, because the same thing.
Yeah,
Same
okay. All right. Did you have any questions or comments, Heidi?
Nope, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So we'll do a roll call vote to approve those policies for the first reading. Brian?
Yes.
Tara?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
And Heidi?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, so that's passed. Those are approved. First reading 500. And our longtime friend, the coronavirus review and update.
I know. I can't wait till we can take this off the agenda as a permanent item. But so a couple of things. I mean, I'm increasingly concerned about the news that we're seeing, the Delta variant spread. Right now, New England continues to be a relatively safe place compared to other parts of the country. New Hampshire is back to being, I think we're 51st in the chart. That includes some U.S. territories. I think there are 54 areas that they're tracking, so mostly states, but it also includes Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Mariana Islands. And so we're not doing that badly. However, we also know that the spread can occur pretty rapidly and things could shift and change on us. So at this point in time, I think we continue to watch it. Our admin team is trying to be very, very specific. And the one topic that seems to keep coming up is masking. So I've got this very draft version of what we're thinking that would allow us to use data to be smart about the decisions. And so I want the board to look at this. It's not ready for prime time yet. It's not ready for like this is the way we're going to do it, but we're trying to use data to drive it. And we modeled this on the metric of community transmission. So what is it that's happening in Litchfield and Hillsborough County? What are we seeing specific to the amount of transmission taking place around us? And what is the level of school impact? So again, looking at transmission within the school, absenteeism relative to illness So we're discounting families that are traveling or that sort of thing. It's like, what do we know about student illness and the impact that it's having? And what is our staff capacity? So do we have staff members who are just not available and it's straining our ability to be effective? So based on that, we're considering having a decision matrix relative to masking at school. You'll notice in looking at this that we're leaning heavily toward the personal choice when things are great. We really believe it's up to individuals, students, and family. And then getting to a stance we have a strongly recommended, like we are strongly recommending you to mask. And we're avoiding anything about vaccination status because, again, that's a personal choice and a personal responsibility that our staff and our students have and families have. But we are also maintaining that there will be times where we will require masking because I think the science, contrary to what some people say, I do think the science is pretty strong that when you mask, you keep your aerosols in and you're not spreading them on to other people. So the one area that we have an asterisk is under, if we're talking about substantial community transmission with a medium impact at the school, we're saying it should be required when people don't have access to the vaccine. So that would mean Griffin and the middle school. And you can't split the middle school down the middle and say, well, 5th and 6th grade don't have access, and some 7th graders, but some 7th graders and all of 8th have access because of age. So therefore, the middle school is going to be kind of sort of masked and kind of sort of not masked. So what we're saying is that when the entire school has access to a vaccine, then we'll stay in the strongly recommended status. So if the vaccine were to become available for a younger grade, younger age, then we would shift that to not just be CHS, but also include
These
LMS.
decisions will be made at the school level, not the district level.
It'll be based on school because, we'll discuss it as a team.
Yeah.
So the entire admin team will discuss, okay, what's the data telling us? What are the trends telling us? What's the right stance that we ought to take? The other piece is that if done correctly, masks should avoid it from escalating and getting to a worse situation. So you can't wait until it's really bad and then say, maybe we ought to put masks on. It's too late at that point. So really trying to get the right spot about when we require that. So
Are we going to require COVID tests for kids that are out with the flu or whatever? How are we going to know who has COVID, who has a sneeze? Because from what I hear, my friend who had it had a sore throat and a headache.
Well, that's people who have been vaccinated generally get a much milder case if there are any symptoms at all.
So we won't even know if they have it. They're just home.
that's happened in the past. We didn't require COVID tests this past year. So
Yes, we did.
Yes,
Oh,
to come back into school.
to come back in. No,
Yeah.
that's right. That's
Yeah.
correct. To come back.
Yeah.
If they were saying, okay, I was sick, they had to get the negative test to show that it was just a cold. You're right. But we didn't. We had plenty of families who just kept their kid home and did not do the COVID testing.
Oh, my kid's going to school because I'm not getting a packet for 2 weeks.
You're
If they have to,
right.
packets do not work if we're making kids quarantine. No third grader can learn multiplication on a packet. And I don't want teachers to teach online again. So it's going to be a tough sell for me who have my kids vaccinated and I'm vaccinated and I'm not worried. That's all that I have to say.
So
Is there a better criteria than the test positivity or new infections? What about hospitalizations?
There were 0 at St. Joseph's. They had 2 and they were non-vaccinated people. I asked St. Joseph's today.
you're up to the level of community transmission.
Yeah.
Um,
Because I know obviously this has been our past benchmark, but really the benchmark is hospitalizations
Why?
and death. Because the vaccinations prevent most people from hospitalizations and death. That's the clear lineage. That's the reason for that.
Right.
So for
I
me, when
Yeah.
hospitalizations go up, if there's a metric to determine that by county,
But then they're unvaccinated people. So
Right. that's the thing. We have an entire school and a half of students that don't have access to the vaccine. So they may not be hospitalized, but
They have a sore throat and a headache.
They're at the high
They have the
risk.
flu is what they have,
What
Or
do we know?
cold.
or a cold. We don't know.
The other piece is, from what I'm reading about Delta, that more children are exhibiting more severe symptoms now. So, in the past, children tended to have a pretty mild case of the COVID.
What are
and
the
then-
symptoms? Because I haven't read anything.
Same as the COVID symptoms, but they're getting more severe cases.
Like what?
They're getting in the hospitalization rates for children are going up.
I don't believe that.
I don't think so.
It's true.
I do not believe that.
Data's out there.
I mean, I'm just, what I've read supports what Tina's saying, that there are increased rates at the younger rates or
Increased
younger
rate of
ages.
hospitalization
Yes.
or sicknesses.
No.
Correct.
Correct.
I'm seeing also there are definitely more hospitalizations for children in the high impact areas right now that are red than there were previously. And they're saying that's connected to Delta.
So
That's
where
what I've
did,
seen.
Because the red areas are the highest density of non-vaccinated people.
Not necessarily
are
true.
the borders closed? Is it that bad? Do we need to close the borders?
Well, and vaccinated people can still
We don't have
spread it
that
to
authority.
unvaccinated
Yeah.
people.
We don't have that authority. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Hey, can I comment on something? I was looking over the policy or the suggestion anyway, and I like it because I think it's a very clear, specific data point, and I think our families will respond really well to having that. My only question was, have we considered having a data point for Litchfield itself with town cases? Only because sometimes what's going around us in Hillsborough County, we could have
Yes.
our own smaller outbreak like what happened at the beginning when COVID happened. Litchfield, for whatever reason, was super high with the initial number of cases and then higher than most of the county, and then eventually got lower than the county. And so I'm curious if we've considered a data point that may or may not be related to just Litchfield. So that was my only
I
question.
assume that's what the level of community transmission was with Litchfield.
Well, we're going to look at the Litchfield number and the county number, mainly because, pardon me, we all know that if you're going to go grocery shopping in Litchfield, you have to go somewhere in the county to do that, right? There's not a grocery store in town. So that's why you kind of have to keep a balancing point on both of those. Point well
Sure.
made. Our number really escalated initially. And, in conversations with the fire department, for example, they've indicated that they think there's been a high level of underreporting. One person in the household will test positive and not everybody else takes a test. The assumption is, well, of course we all have it also, but it doesn't reflect in the numbers. So I think we have to watch both numbers to make sure that we have a handle on it.
So I'd be curious.
Absolutely.
I just
I just was going to say, I don't think it should be just Litchfield number. I just thought it should be maybe a bench point, only because the community transmission, it specifically references Hillsborough County, but I don't see that it represents the town. So that was my only feedback on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd also be curious as far as what the numbers were as far as absenteeism percentage 2 years ago.
So we run about a 4% absenteeism rate in normal days. It's 4. So we sort of doubled it. So we're saying 7 gives us a little bit of extra wiggle room, just given where we are.
Is that during like winter months also? That 4%?
No, what was our high point last year?
Not last. You can only go
The
by
year
last
before that, for like the.
I
Sorry,
know,
the year
but was
before.
it over 15? I'm not even sure it was.
So by illness, I think we're,
Oh, due to illness, sure.
how do I say this? There are going to be key days in the year where you just have more absenteeism. So, there's always that, what's going on here. You have to talk about that number because it could be, the day before a holiday, there's a higher rate that just happened. So
Someone just sent me this, and it says, the cases are rising. On the bright side, the symptoms have been mild, coughing, sneezing, running. It sounds like the flu.
For vaccinated individuals.
This is children under 12. Under 12. Mild symptoms. It's the flu. And I understand, like even in school districts, when there's a flu outbreak, you shut down the school. I totally get that. If we're missing half the 20 kids out of the 5th grade, there's a problem.
Yeah, they, recently they reported that in some states, it's the worst it's ever been. They're hitting a peak of hospitalizations that are the worst they've ever seen. So, and they specifically said, and a large spike in the number of children that they're seeing in the hospital. So, I mean, that is the data that is being reported and shared out there. So,
What did, Tara, you were following the numbers, aren't you, in the Red Cross?
If I can just,
I can find an article to completely contradict everything that somebody says here. It's just my
But
thoughts.
it's a matter of where the article comes from and who is.
Yeah, so my
where the
source might not be
data-
your
where the
source.
It's also a
data
matter
is.
of what states right now
Yeah.
that you're seeing the.
I agree.
increase.
We have
And
one of
it's
the
in-
highest
it's
vaccination rates.
in the
don't we,
Midwest
Tara?
and it's the South.
We do. Yeah, New Hampshire, I mean, we have we're in the top tier. I found a graph that had us, along with the
54%.
top 10, I don't know, states that had
Right.
high vaccination rates.
we're
So
over
that
50%.
helps us.
Concord, I just heard Concord School District just passed. They are mandating masks for all individuals in the school until Concord reaches a 70% vaccination rate.
Well, I
That's
refuse
considered
because you choose not to get vaccinated. That's baloney. You can't make somebody get vaccinated. You have to wear a mask
I'm
because
not saying-
so-and-so's not getting vaccinated. That's insane. I'm going to write a letter to Concord tomorrow.
I was just.
we just lost.
No, I think that's crazy. No, Ed, that's.
I'm not saying that's the right fit for Litchfield, and I'm not saying that at all. But I think there's still a few weeks before we start back at school, and the data that's coming out and the daily reports that are coming out is concerning. We have to. I mean,
The parents need to make their kids wear masks.
well, that's the other piece of it too. Is I'm thinking, I know.
And again, that's where it comes to parent choice. Like I have one who's under 12. She's going to wear a mask when she goes back to school
Mhm.
because that's how that's my comfort level.
Mhm.
Then once she can get vaccinated, she'll get vaccinated, and then she may wear a mask, may not wear a mask. I'd prefer she didn't at that point.
But if I have a cold, I'm going to wear a mask to school. I'm not going to miss 20 days for a runny nose because I know it's allergies.
But I think that's the personal responsibility piece. You heard Bill say tonight, I'm wearing my mask because I don't
Right.
feel well. I wore a mask on Monday. We had a campfire over the weekend, and I knew it was the smoke that got at my throat.
Yeah.
But
Just
did
in
I?
case, right.
I wore it out of an abundance of caution. I come in the office like I have the mask on because I think it's just the smoke, but I had it on.
Just
It was the smoke.
to speak to the GMS population, because that's the population that I work with, and they are not able to be vaccinated. If I have a classroom of 20 kids and they're all wearing a mask because that's what we do to protect our friends, they will keep their masks on.
But that's not our
But
job
Liz-
to tell them.
But Liz, if I'm in a class where you need to wear a mask because mommy said so, but you don't have to, and this one's taking it off, I can't remember if that one should keep it on or not keep it on. What did parents say about this? That's a nightmare classroom management scenario for the teachers.
But again, it comes down to family choice.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I know you know that how I feel about this. I feel like if we have populations that are unable to be vaccinated, that don't have access to the vaccine, I think they should be wearing masks.
And that's your choice. And you are vaccinated.
I
and-
think my opinion as a school board member is I think that unvaccinated populations should have to wear a mask to school. So that's where I stand on it.
And I feel completely opposite.
I'm
It should be-
opposite.
Should be family choice.
I think it depends on the spread that's happening right now. I mean, if it's
Mhm.
low or moderate, then parent choice in the elementary or in the under 12 area. But if it's substantial,
Well, that's what
I like the
that's what
graph.
chart says.
The chart's excellent.
I'm fine with low and minimal being personal choice. Moderate, I think for unvaccinated populations, I would rather have either strongly recommended. I would rather have strongly recommended there.
Strongly recommended.
Because
Still
you go
parent
from
choice.
moderate, and with this Delta variant, you go to substantial very quickly.
Oh, we don't know that.
What did the survey say?
What's
The parents for masks.
that was sent out before Delta showed up.
Yeah, and I think what people really were talking about was the required level. We have families who say never require, and I from a public health point of view, I think we really have to say, look, if we're trying to prevent this,
Well, that's why this is
You
a
know,
great graph.
we have to have some point where we just say, we want to prevent this from
Right.
getting worse. And by the way, keep our schools open, because last year we were
Right.
masked and we were open largely for the school year. There were a few cases where we had to shut down. We don't want to do that
Yeah.
again.
We could use this for the
Heidi's
flu.
computer died, so she'll be jumping back on.
She's
it.
back in.
Oh, she is, okay.
She's back with us as a
I'm
PTO,
back.
PTO member.
She
So,
also sent me.
Oh, sorry.
no, you're good. Don't worry.
Hi, Heidi.
Hi.
Do you want to say what you told me about the AAP? Is that the
Yeah,
American
so I-
Academy?
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I was just saying how I Googled it because I know I read it somewhere. The American Academy of Pediatrics were saying that there's an 84% increase in cases with children and the severity of those cases.
And those
So
parents,
I
kids
mean,
can
I-
make their kids wear masks. That's
I'm
just
sorry,
my
I
thought.
didn't hear that.
I'm sure you can figure out what I said.
But again, 84% increase. What was the number to start with? 100, 1,000,
Understood.
50,000, a million,
I was just
10 million?
Again, I'm going back 5 minutes ago where the question was, has there been an increase or not? And it's, yes, there has been an increase. I can't say in terms of severity of symptoms or not, and I can't say it's closer to here. What we're, I think, being asked to do is to weigh in on what the policy should be for the school year going forward. And I think the admin team has laid out a pretty comprehensive plan with very clear data points for what that should look like. The only thing I don't really understand is what's the difference between strongly recommend and parent choice? Is that essentially still parent choice,
That's
what I just
but
said.
just
Yeah,
a little
there is
stronger?
It is, because I think what that means is that we're stepping up our communication. So when we're in student choice, we're not sending daily emails that everything is, that we're worried, right? When we say strongly recommended, we're putting something behind it. We're stepping up and saying, listen, it's something we want to prevent. We want to stay open. We want to keep engaged in-person learning. So we strongly recommend that you put the mask on. And by the way, think about your vaccination status. We strongly recommend, if you're not vaccinated, that you consider that mask. And the same thing in the classroom for our staff who are working with students, that we're going to be asking them, think about masking.
Even
I wasn't
if they
worried
are
about-
vaccinated. It's your choice.
I wasn't worried about myself on Monday. I'm vaccinated, right? And I've had my own experience with the COVID. So, I was doing it because not everybody in the office has had it. And so out of an abundance of caution, I'm thinking about others. That's what we have to appeal to. And I think that's where the strongly recommended is. It's trending upward. We're seeing indicators that have us worried, and we are strongly recommending that you mask up.
But what Tara was saying, or somebody was saying, or Heidi, I'd like to use Litchfield numbers because Manchester isn't really us.
Right. If we can get them,
Yeah.
I want to be careful about building a metric that we can't get at the number, or that we don't feel is reliable.
Well,
So-
Last year, Hillsborough was separated from Manchester.
And Nashville.
And I'm sure there's a lot of people like me that I just do drive-by grocery shopping now. So I don't even go in the store.
Yeah.
But how are we going to even know if kids have COVID? We should do it by absentee rate. If 30% of LMS is out or caught sick, that means something serious is going on, whether they say they have COVID or not. The flu, anything.
Well, that's what you're looking. That's the other
Yeah.
criteria. You have a level at school, and then you have the transmission level in
Yeah.
the community. I think the chart's fine.
And I'm not sure that chart is final. Tomorrow morning, I have a 9:00 call with all the South Central superintendents. There's another chart that's being proposed by superintendents in opposite ends of the state. I don't like their chart as much as this chart personally, because they are basing it on vaccination status. They also get into indoor versus outdoor. I'm not worried about outdoor. I think outdoors, there's, way more air to make sure that you're not sharing it in the same way as you are
And
inside. So,
outdoors can be personal choice.
so
Okay with that.
I think something like this gives us a better guide, but I'm not sure we got it
See
right.
if we could find, and maybe talk to the fire department. Our kids have been out of school now for a couple of months, not wearing masks, playing together, doing all kinds of stuff together. I'd like to know how many children right now are affected with COVID.
Not many, because we don't have high levels right now. I'm not saying
Well,
right
that's
now
what
we
I'm
need to
saying.
decide
Right now,
that they wear a mask.
they're all interacting
Yeah.
with each other.
Yeah.
So in the past, then if we were all concerned, even being outdoors, wearing masks if you're going to congregate
Right.
and be in a group.
Well, it'll
Because
be in
you can get
Hudson
COVID.
because they had that huge outing yesterday. All these towns are doing their night out with the library and the fire department. Like half of Hudson was at Elmern last night.
Yeah, I thought I saw this morning that Rockingham County just moved into substantial transmission. So,
So I appreciate the conversation and feedback. We've had it at the admin level. I hope you see that we're trying to come up with something that makes sense. I don't think it's responsible to take masking off the table. I think will be places where masking will help. I do think the science backs it up. And I just think we have to find the right way to do it, because if we require masking, we could have some families who say we're going to keep our kid home.
Or sue us.
And we're not, well, yes, but then those lawsuits take so much time through the court system that, and the two that were sent, what was it, Hollis and Bedford, they were dismissed. So
Missed, yeah.
it wasn't really helpful to understanding exactly the
But
issue.
people are angry. They don't want to be told what to do. Live free or die.
You want to keep the schools open.
I want to keep the
when it gets
schools
to extreme,
open.
Then that's when it's.
I don't want
Mhm.
teachers to do
Have to have
asynchronous
language
learning again either.
Shut the door.
So if we close the schools, the teacher's going to have to do asynchronous learning again?
if we close the schools, they'll teach
Remotely.
remotely.
Yeah, and that
And that's-
isn't
we don't
in
want that to
anybody's
happen.
interest, right? And Live Free or Die has always had restrictions.
Well, they took it off the.
There's still a speed limit on the highway.
Advertisement.
I'm not on the Audubon.
Yeah, it's not
on my way
politically
home,
correct
so.
anymore. Yeah.
All right, so we'll be back in August, and really we need to have some clear communication for our families at that point. So thank you for
So
that.
is this
feedback.
right now, what you just said, I mean, some clarification for families. So this is our plan as of right now, correct?
This is draft as of right now, but it's where my thinking is and where the admin team's thinking
So
is.
if things were to remain the same come day one of school, this draft would then become,
And we're ready for families to go to St. Francis if we mandate masks again. Probably 5 or 10 families, 5 kids or
well, right
something.
now,
Yeah.
on the draft, we're not mandating. it.
Yeah.
And the only time we're mandating them is when it's
When it's
wicked
extreme.
out of control.
Yeah.
We have to
So,
protect the other students in the school.
I'm just saying, so the parents can look at this right now, and I realize this draft,
They can make a decision based on what it says.
no, that this, if things were to remain as they are now, this would be the process going in.
Is that true?
and I believe that the schools in the area are going to have some decision rule that may differ
Mhm.
from this one, but I think everybody's going to have a decision rule.
Oh,
I don't think any superintendent is taking masks off the table when you get to that level. But each community has to decide, what's green, what's yellow, and what's red.
Right.
Do you want input from the public? Or are we just going to make the decision?
We've had input from the public.
When?
Well, in the surveys and so
The
forth. But
surveys.
yeah,
But you said
I
the
would
surveys
love.
are old. This is a new thing.
But there's also, we know the public says no masks. I don't want my kids to wear a mask. I don't want my kids to wear a mask.
Some members.
Some members,
yeah.
yes. But this isn't an issue of what everybody wants. It's not a popular thing. It's what we need to do to protect our students. So if things get bad and things are severe and we have substantial or a lot of cases in the area, I think we have to be able to we have to have the flexibility to make the decision to do.
Where are we right now? Are we in the level of community transmission? Are we in minimal? Are we in mod? Have we been minimal
We're-
the whole
Which chart are we
summer?
looking at?
So all right, let's go through the exercise.
Yeah.
Bear with me a second because I have it open.
Okay.
So
These are people that are going to the doctors and they're reporting that we're still going to do that whole reporting back to district thing. I'm just like, if I go to my doctor and they say little Mikey has COVID, they're going to tell me to tell the school?
Yeah.
I'm just curious
I
what.
don't think, I don't know if we have guidance from DHHS on that for this coming school year.
I'm not sure I can actually go through the exercise right
Okay.
now because they've actually changed the charts since we looked at them every day last year. That's not what we were seeing before. But you
one
can
is
see, so Hillsborough, it is zeroed in on our county.
Yeah.
But it says active cases, no data, recovered cases, no data, fatal cases, 650 people. So
What was the last one?
What is
Fatal
this?
Well, this morning, I think on
Fatal.
MUR, they reported 879 active cases in the state.
How many are vaccinated?
didn't break that.
95% are
No,
unvaccinated.
of those cases, you
Yeah.
know,
Or unvaccinated.
Yes.
I don't know, but they were saying that was largely the unvaccinated
Mhm.
population.
So where is this tracker? That isn't the one that used to be Harvard, that used to be Brown.
Brown.
No,
Harvard.
the brown one is up here with a frowny face, I think.
Let's go for Yale.
That's the one I.
Oh, no,
I
no,
was
no, I'm
thinking.
sorry. It's up here. Hang on. I got to get to the right
Okay.
location. All right. So this is the one that we've typically been working with, right? The map.
Mhm. Yes.
And again, it shows the danger areas are, as
Mhm.
Brian said, it's the South and the Midwest.
Oh, isn't that surprising?
And
Where
Yeah, right.
99% of people are unvaccinated.
the worst state is Florida. 100, I mean, look at that
Shocker, yeah.
number.
I know, right?
And then if you scroll down in it and you find New Hampshire, where are we?
But this,
I
we're,
think I see it. It's like the 7th one.
Number 48. And then
We're
if
in
you,
yellow.
we're in yellow.
Yeah.
And then the
If
two
you
numbers
click-
that we're looking at are
If
the
you click
daily
on-
new cases, right?
Mhm. If you click on the plus sign next to New Hampshire, they'll show you the counties.
Right.
There you go.
Oh,
But why should my kid wear a mask because people don't get vaccinated? If all those people are vaccinated in the
I don't think
hospital.
vaccinated people should wear them. I think it should be the unvaccinated people. Well, I mean,
Because
you can't
vaccinated-
say you
you
have
can
to,
still
but you know.
spread
you can
if
still
you're
carry it. And
Yeah.
the other thing is they're talking about
you
the
can
number of
respect the
breakthrough
unvaccinated
cases.
people.
Yep.
So here's Hillsborough County, 7.8 and 32.2. So taking those numbers back to the chart,
Mhm.
32.2. Did I shut the thing? I did.
Is that
Where's it fall?
32.2 what? That's the new infections?
Sounds like a percent.
So 32.4 is the daily new cases, 7-day moving average. Isn't that what's in the chart? Isn't it lined up to that?
7-day moving average. You've got level of community transmission. And
The 7-day average is for the PCR testing, and that's in percentages. So less than 5%, 5 to 10, and then greater than 10. And then the new number of new infections per 100,000 over prior 14 days.
Mhm.
Less than 50 would be
Yeah.
considered
This is a
minimal.
SAS
So if that's
testing.
30,
Now, the
No, but
reason
that's 32%?
those metrics were on there because they were on the DHHS website. So that's why it was easy to just say, here are the numbers and plug them in. This is a little bit of a different tracker.
Mhm.
And then when I go down below, this new thing that's here,
Mhm.
you know, I mean, this is 4.2 billion vaccines worldwide. I mean, that doesn't help me.
Great.
That does not help me, right? So
Oh, you can go down though. On the left, you can click on New Hampshire, Hillsborough County. What is,
well, let's click on Hillsborough and see what it,
can you click on Hillsborough?
no, I think I can delete Hillsborough, but I don't
Oh.
want to do that either. So click plus to drill down to a state or city. So actually, we've already drilled down to
Okay.
Hillsborough. Confirmed cases. So this is confirmed cases worldwide, 199 million.
Mhm.
Notice that that's the 199. So then it's 35 million in the US, 101,000 in New Hampshire, and 36,000 in the county. But that's confirmed cases, and that doesn't tell me again.
And
We have 1 to
Active.
4 cases
So-
in
So
Litchfield
is
as of August
DHHS
3rd.
not producing the
I think-
numbers anymore?
I think this is the chart. I don't know where it went.
Hold it. Interactive
It refused to connect.
dashboards, Overview.
That's to be concerned about, is just what we're utilizing for
Right.
that community.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
If we have 4 active cases in Litchfield, then it's below 50.
Is it below 5?
So let me get the
5%.
dashboard
Below
aspect
5%.
fixed because let me see if
Below
this gets
1%.
us there. The COVID-19 dashboard.
So I did find something, covid19.nh.gov /dashboard/overview. My God. And then I see Hillsborough. So the 7-day test positivity, it's 4.2%.
I just found it too.
Okay.
So I believe that this is the chart that's not working on the other dashboard. But notice
So
right
technically,
here,
we're in minimal.
we are in minimal because the
If we're
7-day
utilizing
test
Hillsborough
positivity is
County to be our
4.2. For the,
benchmark.
Correct.
Tara, what's Rockingham County?
And that actually, that does not exclude
Rockingham is
Manchester either.
5.4.
So that's substantial.
no, it's
Moderate?
moderate.
Moderate.
Manchester?
Belknap County
Londonderry,
is
Derry.
3.4.
Oh, Manchester is
Merrimack is 3.8.
Manchester's 4.8, and Nash was 5.3.
So we're minimal or moderate.
So does it
depending
give
on
the
where we are.
number per 100,000 people in the last 14 days?
Yes. If you do the county, Brian, it's 77.4 is new cases per 100,000 people.
So that puts us in the moderate rate.
77.4
Again, because people choose not to get vaccinated.
infections.
And again, it's not Litchfield, but it's
But it's where we,
That's where we live.
So, but even if we're in moderate for these criteria, it wouldn't put us into the mandatory masking unless
This
there's
kids
a
were
high
absent.
level of school impact.
Correct.
right.
But
So
now,
it's-
right now, there's zero school impact.
Not true. We have staff. We do
True,
have staff.
Some.
True.
Yeah.
It's almost
No.
like a checks and balance, like the government.
And I think the other thing too is our admin team, we're not going to react on a dime because it trickles, but it's the trend. It's what have we been, so think about the charts that we were sharing last year. Those, I want to capture that data in a chart so that we know what it is we're tracking and then what is it telling us. So when we see it trending up, we're going to, remember, we're not going from no masks to masks. We're going from choice to, hey, we really recommend this. Help us out. Help your neighbors, appealing to that community sense before we don't want to get to red.
I
So
like that.
it's escalating
I like
the
that.
language to say, help yourself, help each other.
Right. That's a kind way of putting it. Yeah.
I had a question on the buses because that's been an issue all
Yeah.
summer.
That's
Is there
federal
a
mandated.
federal mandate on?
There
school
is.
buses?
I misunderstood the rule. So
Okay.
the whole masks are required on public transportation. If you take an airplane in the US, you have to wear a mask the entire time. If you're on a train, you have to wear it. It applies to school buses. I didn't realize that. I viewed it as, yes, it's a public transport, but
Privately contracted.
we don't just pick up
Yeah.
anybody standing on the
Right.
corner either. So
But at
It's
least
not
it's
the same as a
summer
city
and all
bus.
the windows are going and yeah.
So we will be obviously following the mandate come opening of
So
school.
all students riding the bus will have to wear a mask.
That is correct. And until the federal law changes, we will have to follow that. We have a meeting with transportation next Thursday, I think. So we'll be reviewing that. But it was a misunderstanding on our part.
So I'd be interested, like after you talk to superintendents, as far as what criteria they're going to be utilizing as far as for community transmission.
Why wouldn't the bus company know that it was a federal mandate if they drive Nashua and Hudson or other places too?
They did, right? And they were telling the kids
Sorry,
they had to wear
Brian.
a mask.
They were they were following it for their drivers. They
Yeah.
were following the mandate.
Oh.
I think I really think it just didn't drill down to the student level in terms of the clients. Again, we're not a city bus that's picking somebody up and then driving them to the grocery store. We're I think we saw it as a private within Litchfield contract. And now that we understand it differently, we'll follow it.
Brian, I know that Hudson pushed off the whole mask thing from this August 2nd school board meeting,
To when? Next.
the next meeting, I guess. I don't know. I do what I'm told.
So you're going to go over this with directors tomorrow? Oh, the other superintendents.
That's right. And once I have a little better bearing on where everybody else is, and some of you might have a better idea. I'm totally open to a better idea. So
And we're comfortable with a not a one size fits all schools model. Is that correct? So if
So-
we shift into one or another box, it's by school, not necessarily the entire district, because there's different needs at CHS than there are at GMS.
That's correct.
Okay.
And originally we started off with 2 charts depending upon whether you had access. It
Yeah.
was too cumbersome. It's like, here's the rule for this, here's the rule for that. And then when we talked about it as a team, it's all about prevention. It's all about
Right.
not getting to red. So we were able to sort of standardize this down, and we're not going to be, like I said, the other draft policy, or not policy, but guideline really gets into vaccination status. And then I just thought that was way too cumbersome.
Okay.
How is a teacher ever going to, even at the high school level, how are you going to
who's gonna-
sort that?
right.
It just doesn't make any sense.
I meant more in terms of, we know kids 12 and under can't be vaccinated right now, so we can make a ruling for those kids under 12. Or we can make a decision based on knowing that they haven't had access. But yeah, once they do have access, it'll be,
So we're not gonna, you don't want to
Different
follow the chart at all. You just want to
No.
mandate masks.
no, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
I like the chart. I wish it was a little more conservative when, under the moderate risk level of community transmission. But I like having a chart and set clear goals and what those indicators are.
For example, we may come back to, I don't know, depending on, I really want to look at how others figure out and what metrics they're looking at. But, we may want to move to required a little bit more rapidly than this. But I would follow the trends of what others are doing.
Yeah.
And
I'm fine. I'd be more comfortable with that, just because it's not mitigation, it's prevention.
correct.
I'd be totally against it.
Me too.
And I think just getting more information as far as how we're going to track and how we're going to track community, because we need to do more than just number, with 100,000 and the 7-day average. It's just,
I'd be,
especially where like the mass majority of the people are going to be unprotected, and that's why they're getting it.
can you send a survey to GMS parents? Are you going to make your child wear a mask in the fall regardless of vaccine status? Or would you be comfortable mandating, or I don't know. I just feel like, I don't know.
I think we already know how many parents will answer.
They don't want masks.
But I think there are also many parents who would appreciate other students protecting their
But
child.
their child can wear a mask.
Their child can wear a
That's not
mask
how it
and protect
works.
themselves.
And again, that's where the parent choice part comes in.
The the other piece too is we had very few issues with students last year. I mean, they did an awesome job, and we
Yeah.
just have to recognize that.
Right.
There's sort of the parental piece, and then there's how did the kids comply and follow along. And
Right.
our students were fabulous. So
But they were still at sports plexes. They were still out hanging out with friends by August, or by April, kids were out hanging out with kids and doing sleepovers again.
Yep. They were also universally masked. And that's why we only
Right.
had 27 cases at GMS.
Are masks going to then be required outside when they're required inside?
you mean like playground?
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of when we got away from that. We spent most of the spring kind of outdoors. It was lifted. So
But when we're requiring them inside, are we going to require them outside? I know it was, but
we didn't. We
Yes, we
we
did
lifted
for a
that.
long
there was a
time.
lot of complaints about that.
Initially on the playground, but then I think you got to remember a year ago this time, we didn't even understand the way it was spread. We didn't understand what it was going to look like in the schools. We learned a tremendous amount of information as it went along. So I think by the end, we were in a much better position to say, here's what's effective and here's
But
what.
they were also by cohorts. They weren't,
Well-
the whole first grade wasn't out there. It was just this class and this class.
So we talked about that today. I mean, there are elements of things we did as a result of COVID that are positive that we're going to carry over. And so,
Like
some of the cohorting, for example, you may not assign classes to a specific spot of the playground, but there still were elements. I'll give you an example of the lockers. So very few complaints about not assigning lockers to students.
At GMS,
And at LMS and at CHS.
because they like carrying their backpacks
My daughter's
anyway.
never used her locker anyway.
No, Tommy never did
Yeah.
either.
So we talked about So you think about all those lockers that exist in our schools, and very few kids are utilizing them. And now that you've gone to a Chromebook, you're not talking about the 50-pound backpack anymore. So, we're at the point where it's like, we're not just going to assign lockers to everybody, because that's a huge staff resource, tracking resource. It's like, if somebody wants a locker, they can request one.
They wear them.
They do.
They wear a sweatshirt.
Or yeah, you're right.
They don't wear one at all.
You're absolutely right. Yes.
But I can give you an opposite. One of my neighbors has a first grader who doesn't know half the kids in her class because she never got to play with them at recess. That's another.
Well, I'm not sure the cohorting at recess is one that we are hanging on to, but lunches in the classroom are something that, we don't have the capacity at Griffin to have students in the cafeteria this year and to safely keep the physical distancing, et cetera. So we've clarified the 3-foot rule to be nose to nose. It's not shoulder to shoulder. It's
Or desk
so
to desk.
exactly. So, there are things that we are able to zero in on and to maintain. All right.
Yeah.
Heidi, you still there?
Yep, I'm here. Sorry, I was talking muted. Classic Zoom issues.
It's
Oh, it's
kind of
dark
creepy now. You're like blacking with your face
yeah.
is scary.
It is kind of dark here, but hopefully a bear came to our site last night, so I'm a little nervous being out here in the dark, but it's okay.
Do we have any
I'll be all right.
any questions on the manifest? I'm moving on.
I'm with you.
All right. No questions on the manifest? All right. That brings us to public input. Do you have anything you'd like to share?
I had sent an email following the community forum to Mike.
Okay.
You're a busy man. I realize that now.
Can we have your name and address, please?
Sorry, Brandon Lafayette, 43 Birthday Drive. As part of the forum, I followed up, and I just wanted to, I don't know the technicalities, how it works systematically, I guess, to get requests on public record. And I have requests that I'd like on public record, so I have them in paper copy here that I'd like to provide to the board. Is that the appropriate way to do it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Is this for everybody?
Then in the future, you could always send it just through email to the school board,
Okay,
and then we'll get it and go to public record because it'll go to the whole school board.
only 2 other copies.
That's all right.
That's all
Give
right.
one.
Michelle puts everything on.
Yeah.
I think it was
And
a
we
Mike
can-
and one for Tina.
Scan an email too.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Nothing else to add? You sat through the whole
Yeah,
thing. Come
you're a
on, what do you
trooper.
think? Any comments? What grade are your kids in?
I've got one daughter, she's in, she'll be going into 2nd grade.
Is she gonna wear a mask in the fall?
We'll find out, I guess, right? I wanted to sit through it. It helped me understand the dynamic of the school board. And even though it was all business, it helped me get to know everybody a little bit better. So
That's great.
that was important to me.
Thank
Great.
you. Thanks for sticking it
Thank
out.
you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Take
Good
care.
night. Let me just sign on to the link.
Michelle, can you copy this and send it to the
I
entire board?
absolutely will.
Thank
Thank
you.
Why don't you give one, if you're not gonna hold that, give it to Mary, because she needs to look at this.
Add that to your pile.
Feel bad. I would have asked him earlier.
So officially, there's nobody there.
Who's that?
That's the public
Oh,
link for public
comment.
comment,
All right.
and
Thank you.
it's empty. So
All right.
I'll close
So
it.
before we go into non-public,
Mhm.
if I can ask, I know we talked about this before, can we just do away with electronic public input and joining the meeting? Since once again, we're the only board that's doing that.
Why?
Well, first of all, it's time consuming because we got to go and check. And I don't understand why we're doing it. No other board's doing it. We have opportunity right now. We can fit like 15 people in this room. If they have public input, I think they could come and they can speak.
I didn't think there was any harm in having it. That's why I supported having it. I don't think anybody's joined, right? But I think it says something that we're giving them that opportunity.
But we have the opportunity right here, like what we used to do.
Yeah. I'm okay keeping it as just another venue for people to share their thoughts and input. That's how I feel about it. Liz, do you have any thoughts on it?
No thoughts.
Yes, you
For
do.
once.
How about you, Heidi? She got
I
back.
don't feel strongly either way. The only thing I would say is I do know that there are some people that even without COVID, it's easier for them to access and be able to give input through a Google Meet rather than coming down just with young children and whatnot. So I'm all about trying to keep ourselves accessible to the public as much as possible. But I don't feel strongly either way.
Yeah, that's probably how I
I
feel.
think some of the rules, honestly, are antiquated. I really
How
do.
do you mean what rules?
In terms of coming in person, I just, to Heidi's point, I'm definitely one of those people that,
I'd much rather
I'm
stay home on my
much,
PJs
I'm
and
much
share my
more
input.
virtual, and I work virtual, and I feel like this is helping to embrace that progressive kind of, way to offer feedback, or not even progressive, technology of today.
All right. Well, thank you for that brief discussion. It sounds like we'll hang on to it until we don't need to anymore, hopefully.
Our team had quite a discussion the other day just about attendance at 504 and IEP meetings. So the remote thing has been really beneficial to families when, you've got to be in a meeting for 45 minutes, but you might have an hour out of work in the middle of the day kind of thing. So we think there's a role for that in the future, and it didn't in any way hinder participation. So in fact, it may have helped in terms of accommodating. In the past, you might get mom but not dad, or vice versa, and now you tended to get more two parents attending. The negative to it is there was more chasing down paperwork. So when somebody's in the meeting and you say, sign this before you go,
Oh, sure.
versus,
Right.
hey, you got to get us that paperwork, right? So so it increased engagement, but it also increased the amount of tracking of paperwork that we had to do. So, but we think it's still of value. So just if that helps the board with where our team's thinking is relative to the role of remote access.
Yeah. Okay.
But we'll do whatever you tell us.
All right. Let's leave it for now. With that, we'll go into non-public session. RSA 91-A:311 A to C. Discussing A, the dismissal, promotion, or compensation of any public employee, or the disciplining of such employee, or the investigation of any charges against him, unless the employee affected, 1, has the right to a meeting, and 2, requests that the meeting be open, in which case the request shall be granted. B, the hiring of any person as a public employee. C, matters which, if discussed in public, would likely affect adversely the reputation of any person other than a member of the body or agency itself, unless such person requests an open meeting. Mrs. Hirschberger seconded. I think that's a typo.
Yeah, it is. That was a cut and paste. Just
Okay.
don't pay
We'll
attention.
do a
to
roll
that.
call vote. Ryan? Tara?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
And Heidi?
Get my
She nodded
Yes.
yes.
third
All right.
water.
Yes.
All right, that brings us to
I'll be right
non-public.
back.